God damn it. Okay.
Yes.
Jonathan, actually, he
5:31.
He wants to stay.
That's you.
Okay, we're going to get started now. Welcome everybody to the November 25th City Council meeting. At this point, I'd like to ask the city clerk to please call the roll.
Counselor Long,
Present.
Counselor McLaughlin,
President.
Counselor Runyon,
Present by Zoom.
Counselor Randall,
Present.
Counselor Richardson,
Present.
Mayor Mays.
Present. Item 3, Pledge of Allegiance. I'd like to ask Counselor Darcy Long to please lead us in the pledge.
I
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Item 4 is approval of the agenda. Do we have a motion to approve the agenda?
Motion to approve.
I'll second it.
Second.
It's moved by Counselor Richardson, seconded by Counselor Randall to approve the agenda. Is there any discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion carries. Item 5, we have a special presentation tonight from Mr. Chuck Gomez regarding tourism for the Dalles, as is entitled. Mr. Gomez, you want to come forward?
My name is Chuck Gomez, owner and operator with my wife of the Granada Theater. We've just purchased a home and our residence is here in the Dalles. And I know our time is short here and I won't dilly-dally or anything. I do not have a proposal. I have an introduction to what I believe would be helpful and beneficial to our community. I feel we have Google as a major economic giant, and a strong tourism base can equal or surpass Google within 18 months. I have prepared and produced a short video that could easily be divided up into 30 small television commercials as we have reached out in the community, firstly to PDX Airport with the opportunity to put a display in their airport that is seen by 20 million people a year. The Granada Theater, the Dalles.com is said nightly on a radio station coast to coast that carries 750 stations throughout the country. And in the next 5.5 months will be heard by over 1 billion, with a B, 1 billion listeners. We are serious about tourism and the way to develop it. And at this time, I'd like to show the short video that we have produced for a presentation. Thank you for showing that video that we produced. I have one short 2-sentence statement I'd like to read that maybe exemplifies how bringing a person to the Dalles for tourism really spreads throughout the community. And none of the aforementioned in the video, businesses or landmarks, paid for anything in this. We put it together. We picked some of the featured buildings and landmarks in the community that we felt would be a strong, make a strong impact on people. And Deborah and I produced this out of our own pocket. But I have a short statement here from Mary Hill Museum of Arts, and it's a quote. "We receive many visitors on Saturday afternoons who are in town to attend one of your concerts later in the day. We're grateful to have neighbors like you who enhance pride of place in the East Gorge by bringing high-quality arts and entertainment to our residents and tourists." Well, that's 35 miles away. If someone comes to the Granada just for a single concert night, just think how many people that would come to community for so many of our landmarks. And really, we need to start focusing on a strong tourism base. I love being able to spend other people's money in our community. And if 50 people, 50 families came each weekend in 1 year, we would generate over $4 million for the community. concerts, attending our landmarks, our museums, eating in restaurants, stopping and buying knickknacks, spending the night. So we look forward to early 2025, make a proposal for tourism and TRT possible funds to really establish a tourism base for the community and financially give a foot up on income coming in from out of town. I thank everyone on the board for your time. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer.
Any questions?
Yes. Are you a for-profit business or a nonprofit business?
For profit,
Asking for $125,000 per year of taxpayer dollars.
yes. Be returned tenfold through tourism.
Yeah, we don't give tax dollars to private businesses.
But you do make tax dollars available to the Chamber of Commerce, and if that tax money was increased, they could possibly and probably hire someone, a tourist-based, to bring tourism into this.
Well, you can apply for the contract that'll be coming up next year.
Where I'm
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Gomez.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Very nice video. Item 6 is audience participation. During this portion of the meeting, anyone may speak on any subject which does not later appear on the agenda. Up to 3 minutes per person will be allowed. Citizens are encouraged to ask questions with the understanding that the city can either answer the question tonight or refer that question to the appropriate staff member who will get back to you within a reasonable amount of time. If a response by the city is requested, the speaker will be referred to the city manager for further action. The issue may appear on a future meeting agenda for city council consideration. We have 4 people signed up to speak, 3 of which would like to speak about short-term rentals. And that is item 11C on the agenda. So those 3 people will certainly be invited to come back up and speak during that portion of the meeting. The one person who is not here for STR purposes is Lisa Farquharson, who would like to speak to the city council. Please come forward.
Lisa Farquharson with the Dalles Area Chamber, 404 West 2nd. I just want to first say thank you. We had some amazing people come to and create a lot of magic downtown today. PUD, Wasco Electric dedicated so many hours today in their trucks and their drivers to put the lights on the downtown poles. We had the Dalles Main Street, we had the Dalles Chamber, and many, many volunteers. And so the tree, the big community tree is now got all its lights and its star too. So we just want to say a huge shout of thanks. That is amazing for that. Just our whole community comes together. So it was a lot of fun. It took us a little bit longer. We added a different aspect to it this year. Might not do that next year. But they are up. Yes, we will tweak them. We know there's a few that need to be fixed. We don't know that till it gets dark. So we will be working on those this week. And then just a reminder, Friday is the Starlight Parade. Begins at 6. It's on our normal parade route, starts at 6 and Weber and winds through the downtown, which is already decked out for Christmas. And we'll end at the chamber for community tree lighting with hot cocoa and cookies, the mayor and Santa. See you right up there. That's a good, thing
Mayor,
to be
you
with.
want the mayor to hobble up there and
We'll
do the
get you a
light.
chair.
Okay.
I promise we'll get you a chair. So anyway, I just want to remind folks, this is our way to kick off the holiday season for the Dalles, and we can't do it without all the community. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Item 7 is the city manager's report. Mr. Klebs.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Lisa stole a little bit of my thunder because I wanted to make sure and thank all the volunteers and organizations that came together to decorate our downtown, and also highlight in particular one of our staff members here, Terry Harkrader, who helped coordinate some of the collaborative work between the Parks Department or Parks District and the city. If you notice, the stars and trees have new garland and new lighting, and so they needed a pretty decent facelift, and so it's nice to see those out for the holiday season. For the council's information, I've distributed Mid-Columbia Community Action Council's annual report, just for your awareness, and wanted to let the council know that the Oregon City County Managers Association had a board retreat last week, and I was appointed to serve on their board. And I'm really excited about this, I first became involved with OCCMA when I was the assistant to the city manager, and it's been very supportive and impactful in my career development. And so I'm excited to get more involved in that organization and support other managers and the profession throughout the state. I also wanted to add that there's a new holiday star located at Vista Reservoir, and also wanted to say special thanks to Jerry Anderson and our Public Works Department and his team for coordinating with the PUD for the installation of that star. That'll be a welcome and very visible new addition to our holiday decorations. And that's my report. Oh, I have one more item. I almost forgot again. I'm looking at her in the back. I'm not going to make her stand up, but the Finance Department received once again a Certificate of Achievement for Excellence in Financial Reporting from the OGFOA. This is for its annual comprehensive financial report for the fiscal year 2023. And just wanted to say thank you to the hard work of the staffers and the Finance Department, and most notably the department head, Angie Wilson. I promised I wouldn't make her stand, but I kind of wanted to.
Those of you that can't see her, she's in the fourth row to the far right. And yeah, excellent work, Angie. How many years in a row is this? 8. Okay. Thank you very much.
She makes it look easy, but it's not, her and her staff.
Okay, we're going to go to city council reports. We'll start with Zoom. Councilor Rod Runyon, you want to lead off?
Okay. Push the right button this time. All right. Well, since we didn't have a meeting on our normal day of the 11th, I'll go back to November 4th, city county work session, attended by all of us here, I believe. Then on the 11th, I participated in the Veterans Day Parade, actually leading the Patriot Guard riders as the advance guard. We go out well ahead of the parade just to let them know that the parade's 20 minutes behind us. And then Q Life meeting, which I believe our city manager will be talking more about in a little later in this meeting, but that was on the 7th of November. And then I was able to attend the first 3 hours of the 6-hour city council retreat held at the college. And that's my report.
Thank you. Councilor Richardson.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. I too, as did all of us and our senior staff, of course, attend the goal setting last Friday. Thought that was fruitful. It's a time of gaining good perspective both on what we have achieved and also what we'd like to in the year ahead. Plaza Committee last week was canceled, but we are moving forward and have a meeting on the 4th. If anyone's really interested in that, come chat with me. I had attended, I think, similarly, like everybody else, a city briefing on several ongoing and upcoming issues. And I met with our community development director last week to discuss some long-term or longer-term planning projects. And the streetlights look great.
Councilor Randall.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I also attended the city county work session and the Q Life meeting, Councilor Runyon. After the Q Life meeting, I met briefly with our newly appointed executive director, Dr. Liz Lance. Attended the goal setting session and also had a briefing with the mayor, city manager, and Councilor Long on phone. That's it.
Councilor Long.
Same as everybody else, joint work session. I participated in the Veterans Day Parade, participated in our annual goal setting, and briefing session. And we did not have a meeting for urban renewal this month, but we will be having one in December.
Councilor McLaughlin.
Thank you, Mayor. I too attended the goal setting all day Friday meeting. I was mayor for the day at the Veterans Parade in your stead. And I attended a briefing with the manager and mayor, like many other councilmen and women. Fire department, transfer of helmets of the chiefs. I did attend that. That was interesting and well attended. I was on KODL coffee break a week ago, And I too attended the city county SIP meeting. And that's my report.
Thank you. In the interest of time, I'm going to forego my report and double up next month. Okay, item 9 is the consent agenda. Items of a routine and non-controversial nature are placed on the consent agenda to allow the city council to spend its time and energy on the more important items and issues. Any councilor may request that an item be pulled from the consent agenda and be considered separately. Items pulled from the consent agenda will be placed on the agenda at the end of the action items section. Tonight, we have 4 items on the consent agenda. First is approval of the October 28th City Council meeting minutes. Second is the approval of the City Council work session minutes. Third is approval of the November 4th City Council joint work session with Wasco County, those minutes. And finally, an adoption of a resolution authorizing an application for a grant to fund the purchase of lands within and adjacent to the Dalles Municipal Watershed. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
Mr. Mayor, I'll move to approve the consent agenda.
Is there a second?
I'll second it.
It's been moved by Counselor Long and seconded by Counselor Randall to approve the consent agenda. Is there any discussion? All those in favor, please say aye or raise your hand.
Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you very much. Item 10, consideration of a contract for the 12th Street storm and sidewalk improvements. Mr. Dale McCabe will give the staff report.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Evening, Honorable Mayor, members of the council. The East 12th Street Storm and Sidewalk Improvement Project is a project that will be installing a curb gutter sidewalk section up on East 12th Street between Thompson and the top of the hill, about 700 feet west of Richmond Street. With that project, we'll also be looking at widening out the shoulder and accommodating for an 8-foot on-street parking lane. And that will be for the majority of the project. There are a few locations along there where some of the houses sit down below the grade of the existing elevation of the road and the driveway. So if we were to bump that out and put the on-street parking section along that lane, it's going to create too steep of a driveway. So at those locations, we'll be bulbing out that area, installing the new curb and sidewalk on the edge of the existing travel lane. Also, with some of those lots that are sitting down below the grade of the existing road, those will require a retaining wall. And with those retaining walls, we'll be putting a handrail on top of the retaining wall at the back of the walk to accommodate for that grade elevation and for the safety of the sidewalk. The storm aspect of the project is going to be installing a new storm main from a 12-inch storm main from Thompson Street, again, up to the top of the hill to where this project terminates. We'll be installing catch basins, probably about every 200 to 250 feet coming down the hill to collect the runoff. That will also eliminate a problem that's been occurring up there over the years with the runoff and the high or the snow melt when the snow occurs during the wintertime. Some of those driveways that are again sitting down below the existing elevation of the existing road have been experiencing some runoff coming down in their driveways. So this project will be eliminating all of that. So this project is being mostly funded with monies that were allocated to the city from the American Rescue Plan Act, or known as ARPA. One of the conditions of that those monies for this project is that we have to have this contract awarded and a contractor on board by the end of December, December 31st of 2024. The other condition of that contract is that we have to have the actual construction completed and accepted by the end of December of 2025. So we have this next year to get this project done. So we advertised for bids for this project on October 11th. We had a bid opening on November 14th, of which we received 7 responsive and very competitive bids. The lowest bid received was from Crestline Construction in the amount of $1,933,455. The engineer's estimate for this project was actually around 2.8 million. So all the bids that we got came in well below that. So again, it was a very competitive bidding on that. So the staff did review all of the bids received, and they were deemed complete. So with that, again, I mentioned that most of the monies for this project are coming from ARPA funds. We do have in the Transportation System Reserve Fund, Fund 13, we have $1,612,482 for this project. Also with this project, within that same Fund 13, we have transportation SDC funds in the amount of $510,761. The SDC funds are available for this project because of the addition of the sidewalk that we're adding for the project and also widening out the road. So we do have over $2 million available for this project. And again, the low estimate or low bid for this was from Crestline Construction at $1,933,455. So with that, the staff recommends that to ask for authorization for the city manager to enter into contract with Crestline Construction for the East 12th Street Storm and Sidewalk Improvements Contract number 2024-008 in an amount not to exceed $1,933,455.
Questions for Mr. McCabe? Counselor Richardson?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Dale, thanks for the detailed report. Can you just briefly describe the outreach component? Like, have you talked to the neighbors about this?
Yeah, we had, so before the project started, when we were getting ready to start with the surveying and stuff, we did a complete mailing of all the residences along that section of 12th Street, both the north and the south sides. And we let them know that there was going to be surveyors coming out, and we gave a description of the project and what this project was going to be and the project to come. And we alerted them that there was going to be surveyors coming out to do surveying. There was going to be a lot of utility locates, and then gave them my name and number to contact if they had any questions. And then also in the end of May, we had an open house meeting. And again, we let all the residences along there know of the open house. And we had some rendering drawings that were made for the project to kind of show what that section was going to be. And we had several of them. I mean, I don't know, 6 or 8 residences show up and ask questions about it and get the information that they needed. So those were the 2 big outreaches, and I've answered lots and lots of calls and phone calls on it as well.
All the construction, I presume, takes place within the city right of way?
Yes. Actually, there will be a couple of the driveways that we have to go farther onto the private side to extend their driveway down with the surfacing, redoing that to be able to put in what's going to be the new grade. So we have to go beyond the right-of-way line just to tie that driveway in. But other than that, the walls, the sidewalks, the road improvements in the storm, that's all within the city right-of-way.
Thank you.
Counselor Runyon?
Yeah, just to clarify, you said we have all the money in those 2 accounts. And earlier in that paragraph of the staff report, you mentioned we have most of it is funded, you said, by ARPA. Is that the money that's in those 2 accounts, or are those additional funds?
The $1,612,482 was the ARPA funds.
Okay, it wasn't clear in the report there, and I didn't get the
Okay.
clarification when you talked about it. All right. Thank you.
Mhm.
Anybody else? When do you expect to start construction and when do you think it might end, weather permitting and all that?
That will be some discussions that we have with Crestline. They could, depending on the winter and the weather. We actually have another project that's going to be coming to the council in the December meeting that we have, that the same contractor was the low bidder on that one as well. So we're going to have discussions with them on which one they want to start first, and which one that they're going to want to do. What we did put in this contract, because we do have the whole year to do it, we did make it known that once you start, you have 120 days to complete the project. What we don't want to have is you to drag this thing on out for over a year, or for a year. So it's once you start, you're committed to the project and you have 120 days to complete it.
Yeah, I'm sure the property owners would appreciate that too. Yeah. Okay, any other questions? Okay, we're looking for a motion.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to make a motion to authorize the city manager to enter into contract with Crestline Construction for the East 12th Street Storm and Sidewalk Improvements, contract number 2024-008, in an amount not to exceed $1,933,455.
Second,
I'll second that.
it's been moved by Counselor Randall and seconded by Counselor Long to enter into a contract with Crestline for the 12th Street project. Is there any more discussion? All those in favor, please say aye
Aye.
or raise your hand. Fine. Motion passes unanimously. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, item 11A is consideration of an ordinance amending the Dalles Municipal Code regarding transient rental taxes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is a co-presentation with me and the city manager here tonight. I'll start it off with a little bit of a history. Council might recall, as recently as September of this year, where the city manager reviewed some proposed amendments to the city's CRT ordinance, which is codified as the Dalles Municipal Code, Chapter 8.04. That night, it was a discussion item, and staff presented some changes, some proposed changes for council's consideration and some additional deliberation, and ultimately to provide us some direction as we intended to bring this back here tonight. At that meeting, due to council's expression of some generalized support for our proposed revisions, you might recognize the red line attached here in your staff report as an exhibit to the ordinance as identical to the September 9th proposal. The vast majority, I'll just stress this, the vast majority of the recommended amendments are administrative in nature. And for the avoidance of any doubt, staff is not recommending, and the attached proposed ordinance certainly does not increase the tax rate at all. And this is very much a quality of life proposal to help city staff in the administration of this ordinance. Just to go down the quick list of some of staff's key recommended proposed changes here in the attached red line, starting with number one, is a quick rename away from what we've in the city of the Dalles called TRT, transient room tax, just to bring it in line with how the rest of the state calls it, TLT. And number two would be deleting some antiquated and unnecessary terms. Again, as a real reminder, the original ordinance was adopted, ordinance number 950 ordinance was adopted in February of 1977. Much of the existing ordinance as it exists here tonight hasn't changed at all since the late 70s. And so this very much needs a facelift, not just for cosmetic reasons, but for public transparency and for staff administration. Change number three of the list of 8 would just be updating and adding some additional terms as they're used in Oregon law. Number 4, and the city manager is going to touch base on this a little bit later, is removing some of the outdated project-specific and entity-specific mandatory allocations of our collected funds, and to enhance the city's fund spending flexibility to the maximum degree. Change number 5 is expressly authorizing the use of the city's electronic lien docket, which is widely used for a number of the city's liens and other chapters of our code. This change is very administrative in nature. It'll help streamline enforcement and save the city some costs associated with physical recordings in the Wasco County Clerk's Office. Change number 6 out of 8 is expanding some refund opportunities, which is consistent with Oregon law, and the city would do otherwise, but I think it's going to be helpful for the city's future and certainly the city's interest to have that be indicated in our code. This happens in situations where there's some sort of overpayment, basically authorizing the city to refund either the collectors or the occupants, and also requiring the collectors to refund occupants in situations of overpayment. Number 7 out of 8 is increasing the interest owed from 1% to 3% in situations, limited situations, where the city grants a tax refund payment extension, or in situations when payments are late. And finally, the key change, the 8 out of 8, is modifying in our ordinance itself the required percentage of funds that are allocated for deposit into what we have known as the Tourist Promotion Fund. Currently, there is a mandatory minimum contribution requirement from the city's collected TRT revenue of 21%. And that's, again, just to stress, that's the minimum requirement. But in practice, the city's has been depositing about 55% of all of the money that we collect under this chapter each fiscal year for promoting tourism. And so staff's recommended revision here is to increase that to 55% just to be in alignment with our current practice. I'll pass it over to the city manager. Just wanted to go over some of these more administrative and legal changes, if council had any specific questions on those before the city manager touches base on number 4.
I have one question, Mr. Mayor, if it's an appropriate time. I just want to be absolutely clear about point 8 and the current, I'm sorry, about the ordinance changing the amount of money we put into TLT. I'm sorry, TLT funds we put into tourism promotion. We're doing that essentially because, if I understand properly, there's a ratcheting provision in state law that says as soon as you've spent X amount, in our case, 55%, we can't spend less than that. Is that correct?
Yeah.
So we are not radically more than doubling our tourism promotion money. We're just actually recognizing that this is what we've been doing. All
Yes.
right. Thank you very much.
Yeah, we're required to put in 21%, but we are suggesting and recommending 55%.
Actually, I'll just to be extra clear, the state requires us to put in 55% only because the city has historically put in 55%.
Right.
Our current ordinance says the mandatory minimum is 21%, but state law says the mandatory minimum is 55%. So in actuality, we've been just complying with state law. The only change here is just making that really black and white in our own code for future city managers and future city attorneys and future city councils to make sure that we don't forget that number.
Good to be black and white with us too.
Yeah, I think
Thanks.
so.
Okay, Mr. Klebs, you want to continue on?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Based on some of council's discussion and feedback at the last time, we had this as a discussion item, as the city attorney mentioned a moment ago. I wanted to update the council on some of the ongoing work that staff is doing in anticipation of decision and action by the council this evening. And that's through the engagement and development of some draft funding agreements with both Wasco County and the Northern Wasco County Parks and Rec District. Again, in that original intent, or at least one component of it, was to continue to support those partners when it comes to some of their water needs, looking at some of the minutes and history, that some of the diligence that staff has been doing. And so we've crafted some funding agreements, which aren't up for decision here tonight, but wanted to provide an update that those have been developed to support those entities' water needs associated with their respective parks, and that those funding agreements have been shared with both entities, and we've gotten some feedback from them. And those would come to council at a future date as part of our budget process and process we use to approve various funding agreements such as that. And so that information was shared with both Wasco County and Parks District. We also provided an update and have been pushing out information on our social media and the city's website about the city's annual funding request for local nonprofits and agencies program. As the council may recall, this is a process that we've had here for a number of years, but we've been making different adjustments and updates over the years to more formalize the process and have a very specific deadline, which is January 31st. And that's the process where the city considers and accepts funding requests from different nonprofits and local agencies. So the council may recall, this is what we use to allocate funding for the budget process for things like the Fort Dalles 4th fireworks, support for Youth Think, and various others. That process will be updated over the course of this year, in particular with support from the council tonight in passing this ordinance. And we've added an additional question related specifically to tourism to that process to allow staff and the budget committee and ultimately the city council to make have some additional data in making a choice between whether general fund revenues are used or transient lodging tax revenues are used, which will bring some more clarity to things like the 55%, for example. And so just wanted to provide that update to council. Those funding agreements were not included in your packet. They're still in development, but would be something we would bring back. I think that's all I had to add.
Okay. Because of the importance of this issue, I mean, this is about the fourth or fifth public meeting we've had regarding I almost said transient lodging tax. This is the third or fourth meeting we've had about this. I'm going to ask if there's anybody in the audience that would like to address the city council before the council deliberates on this issue for up to 3 minutes. Anybody in the audience would like to address the city council? Yes, sir. Please state your name and address for the record.
Kevin Driscoll. I live on East Scenic Drive. Just real quickly, I would suggest to the council and to City Hall, the way that the taxes
Excuse me, you're Kevin Driscoll?
Yes,
Okay, I think you want to speak
I
regarding.
want to speak
11th
on a
Street.
separate issue as well.
Oh, go ahead then. Go ahead.
The TLT now, specifically, the way it's administered is extremely cumbersome. And frankly, I think Marlo spends a good part of her week just dealing with the TLT. There are mechanisms by which the tax can be remitted automatically from Airbnb, from VRBO, et cetera. And I suggest you look into that because I think the administrative burden of the tax probably exceeds the revenue brought in. That's all I have to say.
Thank you very much. Anybody else? Please introduce yourself, Mr. Baker.
Hello, Scott Baker, Executive Director for Northern Wasco County Park and Recreation District. Thanks for allowing me to speak tonight. I know that it isn't, the proposed funding agreements are not part of the action item tonight, but as staff works with Wasco County and the district, I would encourage the counselors to consider that the draft as proposed so far still requires the park district to go for an annual ask for our operating funds that we need to for park operations. There is a component that covers the water cost, but that still leaves a gap of over $160,000 that we need to run the pool, amongst other things. And so I know that at the last meeting, there was discussion about our need for having some reliable funding year after year and having a multi-year agreement. Having the as proposed, it requires us to ask for funds by January 31st. Our budget is largely done by January 31st. And so we wouldn't get an answer in time for us to prepare an annual budget that allows the park district to operate. And so it's incredibly important that we have a multi-year funding agreement so that we can plan appropriately. Otherwise, we're left at last minute to cut or add funding after our process is largely done. So I know that's not the point of the discussion, but I like to keep it at the forefront of the discussion moving forward.
And those
Makes
agreements
sense.
will be brought before the city council for approval too. So, yeah, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much. Anybody else? Okay, we'll start with city council discussion. Or if anybody wants to make a motion, we can go that way.
I had a real reservation last meeting when we talked about this. I feel it's been met. I appreciate my fellow counselors heeding me and letting the process move forward and getting some more clarity and get a little farther along with the funding agreements that we will be proposing. So I feel much better about it now.
Thank you. Anybody else?
Mr. Mayor, I'll make a motion.
Mhm.
I move to adopt General Ordinance number 24-1408 as presented by title only.
McLaughlin will second.
Been moved by Counselor Long and seconded by Counselor McLaughlin to adopt the ordinance regarding transient lodging tax. Would anybody like to have the ordinance 45 pages read tonight in its entirety?
It's 14 pages.
Or
That's the red line. You can't count that.
technicality. Okay. I'd like to ask the city clerk to please read the ordinance by title only.
General Ordinance number 24-1408, an ordinance amending the Dalles Municipal Code, Chapter 8.04, transient room tax.
All those in favor of the motion, please say aye or raise your hand.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Thank you to the staff for all the hard work you've done on it. Okay, item 11B. Consider some pre-implementation compliance measures and recommendations in regards to FEMA. Mr. Chandler.
Thank you, Mayor Mays, councilors. I'm joined with our new senior planner is joining us today, Sandy Freund. So introducing her to the team here. Since starting with the city early last month, Sandy has been entirely involved with this next topic we'll be discussing here. Council is aware of this coming, I believe in a previous, probably been briefed on it, as well as previous city manager's report. I think at the last meeting, we discussed what we're going to discuss now. This is the FEMA's pre-implementation compliance measures, known as PICMs. Brace yourself. There are quite a few acronyms in this report. I will do my best to call them as they are, but I just want to let you know that there are quite a few in here. So the FEMA Region 10 issued a mandate for the National Flood Insurance Program participating jurisdictions, including the city of the Dalles, to implement one of three pre-implementation compliance measures. These are known as PICMs. These need to be implemented by July 31st, 2025. This is a mandate that's impacting 239 Oregon communities within 31 counties. The purpose of the PICM is to support ongoing survival of threatened or endangered species in accordance with the Endangered Species Act. I will get into the background, but the crux of this is based after a federal lawsuit. FEMA was actually sued. I'll get into that. And this is kind of the trickle-down effect as a result of that lawsuit. So in 2009, environmental groups sued FEMA for failing to consult with the National Marine Fisheries Service about the NFIP's impact on endangered species. FEMA settled those cases by consulting with the National Marine Fisheries Service, which issued then a 2016 biological opinion, finding that the NFIP threatens several ESA listed species and included mitigation recommendations. Following up in 2023, environmental groups once again sued FEMA over the slow progress to move this process forward in implementing the BIOP. And in response, FEMA has announced PICMs in 2024. This will bridge the gap until a full implementation is in place, which is slated 2027 at this point. So according to FEMA, communities are required to select one of three PICM options by December 1st. So yes, next week. The three options include a model ordinance, which is adopting a model ordinance incorporating the ESA requirements into the city's land use development ordinance, a permit by permit, which requires permit applicants intending on developing in the floodplain to submit individual floodplain habitat assessment and mitigation plans to ensure that the development occurring on the property within the floodplain will achieve no net loss. And the last option is prohibiting all new development in the floodplain. So several Oregon communities have informed FEMA that fully implementing those measures does require an extensive land use review process, community engagement, notifications, and a comprehensive public hearing process. I've been on a call with multiple communities in the past few months, and there are caught off guard, you can say. A lot of the communities around the state are definitely caught off guard with these very abrupt requirements being thrown on all of our communities. In addition to these PICM requirements, FEMA is also working on updating the original 1984 flood maps that we use to determine whether or not a property is in the floodplain. This process started in 2014 and is expected to be complete in late 2025, early 2026. We presented, I think this last year, maybe time flies, maybe it was earlier this year, the previous year, we presented, FEMA Region 10 was here talking us through those map updates. This is the process that's currently in place. So until those new maps are finalized, we are still required to look over those maps to determine if a property is in fact in the floodplain. Based on these maps, the 1984 maps, 155 properties within the Dalles urban growth boundary are identified within the floodplain. Once the maps are adopted, 122 more will be added, and 22 will be removed. So there's an overall impact of about 300 properties. I'll get into that here in a little bit for notification purposes. So July 15th, 2024 is when FEMA sent these notifications to all NFIP participating communities, including the city of the Dalles, Wasco County, and directing this requirement for the no net loss to be added into a code or the permit by permit provision being implemented. So there's a little bit of a timeline included in your staff report. December 1st, we are required to contact FEMA, letting them know which option we choose. January 31st, we start collecting data on development permits that are happening in the floodplain. July 31st, we are required to implement the model ordinance if that is what we choose to do, or we continue on with the permit by permit. Effectively, starting December 2nd, whether or not the city adopts the model ordinance, we are required to start implementing permit by permit application review to every property that comes in for development review. So there's a little bit of a comparison in the staff report, taking a look at the model ordinance. The draft model ordinance, which is attached as attachment 2, it was prepared by FEMA to align with the draft implementation plan. The model ordinance focuses on mitigating development impacts within the floodplain to ensure this no net loss requirement is met with measurable requirements for mitigation. While the model ordinance provides those standards, each community must then take that and adopt it to their own. It is a helpful tool, but we do need to be mindful that we go through and we have to make sure that it fits, tailor fit to the city of the Dalles. Also ensuring that all clear and objective housing standards are met with these with this new ordinance. This is the option that staff is recommending we pursue here at the city. The next option is the permit by permit, which, as I mentioned earlier, this requires a habitat assessment report for every single project that comes through. So we would be required to review all of these as they come in. As you can imagine, this is still very new to staff, these new requirements. So it's going to be a little bit of a learning curve. And we could see a bit of a delay in reviewing floodplain applications, but this is what we are required to do come December 2nd. And then the last is prohibiting all development. Staff is not recommending this, and we're not even going to talk about it further. So there's no net loss requirement. This is either adopting the model ordinance or permit by permit options requires the city to meet this no net loss standard for floodplain actions. For permit by permit, applicants must prepare a habitat assessment report and analyze the project's impact on the floodplain. Additionally, there are sections of the model ordinance that are added in to ensure this no net loss is required, and at a minimum, the section 6 outlined in the model ordinance must be implemented into the code. So cities can effectively create a floodplain ordinance that works for them. They just must ensure that section 6 is included in that. So provided here, what's provided, this failure to comply. So for communities that do not comply with choosing a PICM, FEMA has stated the following. FEMA compliance visit. This would be a representative of FEMA coming and checking in with the city to just check in and see why we haven't followed through. The next would be suspension from the National Flood Insurance Program. The other is a loss of availability of National Flood Insurance Program insurance policies. And then the last is no consideration for disaster relief funding. So some pretty steep compliance measures that need to be met here, and that would have a huge impact on this community. So next steps is, as I mentioned, staff is recommending that the council select and have us move forward with implementing the model ordinance option as soon as possible, while recognizing that permit by permit will start on December 2nd. Any land use process of this magnitude, we do know will impact property owners. So therefore, an extensive ballot measure 56 requirement notification process. This is a requirement that is, it's required of all land use applications when a city restricts certain uses in zoning districts. So as mentioned, we are in the process of updating our flood map. That is not expected to occur. The new maps won't be released for prelim review until 2025. There's another 90-day appeal period tacked onto that. So we are looking at about 2026 before the maps are updated. So in an abundance of caution, when we do the ballot measure 56, we would be including current property owners in the floodplain, property owners that will be in the floodplain, and those that will be removed, because we want to make sure there's going to be that overlap. So we want everybody to know whether or not your property is being impacted by these requirements. I do have a typo in here. I do want to mention that we are prepared to begin implementation of this as soon as possible, late winter 2025 or spring 2025, not 2026 for full implementation. So staff's recommendation with that, we move to direct staff to notify FEMA Region 10 of the city's intent to begin the implementation process of the model ordinance no later than December 1st, 2024. And then we do have those other options laid out for you. Although it says recommendation, we are not recommending option number 3 here, which would be a moratorium on all development within the floodplain. And with that, I am more than happy to answer any questions.
Questions for Mr. Chandler? First of all, I'd like to welcome Sandy to the city of the Dalles. Hope you have a long career here. Thank you. Well, welcome aboard. Okay, questions, comments? Councilor Runyon.
Not so much a question as a complaint about a federal agency. And I wonder, in the number of phone calls that you made regarding the subject, that FEMA was, first of all, so slow in doing what they wanted to do that they had to get sued to move forward. And then they throw it out here with, a few days warning, or be threatened with non-compliance. It's just absolute moronic. And I hope I don't know if we have the staff to get this done. I'm just concerned about that. I'm glad we have a new member on board, but I'm sure other small communities with small planning departments are shaking their heads and trying to figure this out. Well, we'll just say yes to everything and hope it all works out. Oh, the maps aren't ready until next year.
Yeah.
It's just, it's ludicrous. And I really feel badly for our planning department because I know there are enough projects going already that this just adds to a very large pile. That's all I had to say. Just a comment.
Well, thank you for that.
You want to say anything more? I mean,
Yeah, I think
you've talked with other communities, and are they all?
Yeah, I think I can share I can share the frustration. FEMA has provided the information, very late in July. Then that was many workshops were laid out after that. Some of the information that they provided at their August workshop actually had incorrect information on it. They had information stating that we actually had to implement these requirements by December 1st. It's a constantly evolving project here. They even told us in one of our recent workshops that it's always best to attend the first and last because information may change between now and then. So we're talking in the course of 3 weeks, their presentation material is changing. Frustration all over the state here. So we are in the same boat as many other communities. We're just trying to do our best to get ahead of the curve on it.
Thank you. That was very discreet. Any other comments or questions?
I just have a question about the next steps. You say we select and implement the model ordinance option while continuing to use the default, the permit by permit as a default pathway. Are we currently doing any permit by permit requirements for mitigation for people who are existing in the existing floodplain at this time, or is it all going to be something new?
Yeah, so we do require, review within the floodplain. We do have flood control measures. We determine whether or not a property is located within a floodplain. All new development is required to elevate the building 1 foot above the base flood elevation. So we do need to determine all that information when it goes into it. If a property is, for instance, a foundation is located below the floodplain line, there's different anchoring procedures that are required, venting procedures. So we do have the process in place, but the requirements for the PICM of adding in the extra provision for the precaution of endangered species, that is not something that we currently have in there. So, yep.
Anybody else?
I just want to be clear on this in my own mind that one of the consequences if we just get frustrated and don't comply is the potential loss of flood insurance for people living or having property in the floodplain.
Yes, that is what's been provided to us.
And then if we were to have a federally declared disaster, we would not be eligible for assistance.
You do run the risk, yes. I do have to say though that they have been they understand they're staffing up. They understand the impact this is going to have on the communities, and they had mentioned they are opening up a technical assistance platform for us to reach out with questions, and it takes a little bit of time to get an answer, but it's there. So we intend on every permit that comes in the period of time. We will be touching base with FEMA to make sure that we're following the process and see if they can assist us along the way.
2 other brief questions, if I may. The model ordinance, you're recommending that because you feel that it gives consistent, clear guidance as best possible, or is there another reason for that?
It does. We were already intending on updating the ordinance, our flood control provisions when we update our map, which we were intending on that happening this year, but with the map being delayed for another 12 to 18 months, it gave us a little more flexibility in being needing to adopt that. But yeah, going with the model ordinance is the most up-to-date standards for flood control provisions. So it seems like the right path going forward.
And my last question, just to confirm, this is essentially is a 3-year decision because essentially this is the gap between where FEMA is and where they're going to be with some final rules.
Correct. Yep. This bridges the gap and there'll be, the final implementation plan will come, 2027.
Well, it's unfortunate added burden for us, for you, but the consequences seem rather severe if we don't go along with it. So it doesn't feel like we have a great deal of choice in the matter.
Your staff report refers to 31 counties that are affected by this.
Yeah.
I think there's 36 in this. Do you know which 5 are exempt? Or,
Southeastern area.
okay.
Yep.
Should be generally places that are not subject to flooding, away from the coast, high elevation.
Okay. Any other questions, comments? Looking for a motion?
All right, I'll go ahead. Mayor Mays, I move to direct staff to notify FEMA Region 10 of the city's intent to begin the implementation process of the model ordinance opinion no later than December 1st, 2024.
I'll second that.
The move by Councilor McLaughlin and
Reluctantly.
seconded by Councilor Richardson to direct staff to begin the implementation process of the model ordinance option. Is there any more discussion? All those in favor, please say aye or raise your hand.
Aye.
Aye.
Those against? Motion carries. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Josh and Sandy. (11C), right? 11C. Item 11C is a general ordinance in regards to the Dalles Municipal Code and short-term rental licenses. Mr. Chandler.
Thank you. So the staff report in front of you today is a continuation from our October 14th meeting. As council remembers, we have been discussing short-term rentals at length for the past 18 months, 2 years, something along those lines. So I won't get into all the details from the previous staff reports, but have provided information here to anybody new to the topic here or new to this conversation. Additional background is provided in the May 8th and October 23rd, 2023, as well as July 22nd and October 14th, 2024 meeting packets and minutes. So this staff report is going to address the modifications to previously proposed amendments from October 2024. These amendments presented are the first proposed for this ordinance since it was first adopted in late 2020. As of the date of this report, there are 47 total short-term rentals in the city, including existing bed and breakfast and vacation rental permits. Of the 47, 33 are non-owner occupied, with 40 of the 47 located in residential zoning districts. So tonight, after all our discussions, staff is going to present you with 2 different options for ordinance to adopt this evening. The 2 options include option A, which is the modifications to all council comments following at the October 14th, 2024 meeting, with the inclusion of this amortization or phasing out provision that I'll discuss in more detail. There's also option B, which just touches on all the modifications from that October 14th meeting. So some key revisions here, the vicinity requirements we discussed at the last meeting. Staff proposed limiting new short-term rentals to areas at least 300 feet apart from existing short-term rentals in residential zones. After discussion at that meeting in October, council expressed interest in increasing this buffer and also to include a 100-foot buffer for commercial zones. So this would be a commercial zones that allow for residential uses, the CBC zone, central business commercial, the recreation commercial, which is our CR zone, and the general commercial, which is the CG zone. To evaluate the overall impact of this increase from the 300 that was previously proposed, staff collaborated with Wasco County GIS to create a map that shows how the proposed changes would affect existing STRs, and developed 3 different scenarios comparing the impacts of a 100-foot vicinity, a 300-foot vicinity, and a 500. And keep in mind, we're only proposing 500 to you, but I just wanted to provide the information to show you that the impact that these vicinities will have on existing operations. This map focuses on the number of STRs impacted rather than the total number of each within a buffer, since a single short-term rental may fall within the vicinity of several others. Note the map does not account for situations involving multiple short-term rentals located within a single building. I think we have at least 1 or 2 of those currently in the city. So scenario 1, which is a 500-foot vicinity residential requirement and 100 for a non-residential zone short-term rental. So the total impact of properties would be 22 short-term rentals would be impacted with that, existing short-term rentals. Scenario 2 is a 300-foot residential vicinity buffer and a 100-foot non-residential, and 18 properties are impacted with that. And then the scenario 3 is 100 for both residential and non-residential, and 6 properties are impacted by that. These numbers basically show you that 22, 18, and 6 means that those are the short-term rentals that are located within the vicinity of other operations. So we've discussed this clustering idea in the past. This could be, you could look at this as mini clusters around town of short-term rentals impacting others due to their vicinity. So in addition to looking at vicinity requirements, we are looking at, or staff is proposing, expanding the notification area for licensing. This was also at council's direction. This would be consistent with whichever is chosen. At this point, it is a 500-foot vicinity that's being proposed, so therefore it would be a 500-foot notification area for residentially zoned and 100-foot for non-residentially zoned. So during the council discussion in October, staff noted that expanding this notification area would result in more property owners receiving notices. So therefore, staff recommended, which in turn leads to increased administrative costs. So staff recommended at that time to support the increase of increasing the short-term rental program's fees to account for this increase in noticing. So to do that, we looked at used the same information from Wasco County GIS, and we took a look at a 100-foot buffer, a 300-foot buffer, and a 500-foot buffer, and factored that into the current postage of 69 cents per notice. So taking a look at that, currently, if you take an average of all of our short-term rentals, there's an average of 11.87 properties that are notified whenever we send out these notices. So when you look at the cost of the current rate for mailing, 69 cents, that accounts for, $8.19 is what it costs ultimately, the average cost for us to mail out notices for short-term rentals when a new rental comes online. So 2 different scenarios that we provided. One scenario is a 500-foot residential notification. So in doing that, we took the average of all the short-term rentals with a 500-foot buffer around it, came up with an average of 68 properties notified within that area. So therefore, we took that, we factored in the 69 cents, which means that the average cost, if you were to expand it to a 500-foot, the average cost for just mailing alone would be $47. We did the same for a 300-foot, where 34.17 properties would be notified, averaged out, which is an average cost there for $23.58. So ultimately what this came down to, we looked at the different increases from 100 to 300 to 500, and staff is proposing this increase of, if in the event of which ordinance is passed this evening, staff intends to recommend increasing the short-term rental annual licensing fees from $75 to $115, with if the 500-foot buffer is proposed here. And also, if it's a 300-foot buffer, we would be proposing increasing it from $75 to $90. So really nominal costs. These are annual fees, but it really covers administrative costs, and that's all we're really looking to recoup with this program. Another topic of past conversation was complaint reporting. Currently, the city requires written complaints concerning short-term rental operations to be submitted to the Code Enforcement Office. There were some concerns raised this last year, these last 2 years, about noise and parking occurring outside of the city's regular business hours, therefore questioning the effectiveness of this process. During council discussions, staff noted that the police department has not received any documented short-term rental related noise complaints in over 2 years, and many of the parking issues that have been brought to, parking complaints are actually they've been all lawful parking matters, parking practices. Some have voiced complaints that overall the process isn't effective, as why would you call the police department for a small matter, such as noise? Maybe they don't rise to the event where you need to contact the police department. So therefore, there could be a gap in overall complaint reporting over this period of time. So in response, council directed staff to extend the complaint process here. So we would be expanding it. The proposed amendment includes city's ability to accept formal complaints via email, written forms submitted on the police department's web page portal. So giving people more of an avenue to complain about a nuisance short-term rental in their neighborhood. To ensure that thorough investigations and enforcement practices may continue, the city does encourage providing detailed complaints, including photos, videos, correspondence, maybe that you had with the short-term rental operator to try to resolve a matter. And then also, as a reminder, this is included in the report, but I think it's an obvious one. It just still needs to be recognized. For any urgent public safety concerns, complaints should always be directed to 911 or the police department. Maximum occupancy. Maximum occupancy for short-term rentals has been and is still proposed at 2 guests per bedroom. Past conversation that we had was taking a closer look at what the definition of a bedroom really was. So what we did is we looked at some example codes, short-term rental codes, as well as the International Code Council, which develops best practice model codes for building safety and sustainability. So in using that, we are staying with the 2 guests per bedroom, but we expanded and created definitions for bedrooms and studios to ensure that short-term rentals provide appropriate space for guests while maintaining the 2 guests per bedroom. So ultimately, we took some of the ICC's definition of a habitable space. We're talking everything from the amount of square footage per person, as well as like a height clearance, different definitions of a bedroom. And we put those together to create the bedroom and studio definitions that are now included for the short-term rentals. So there's some clarity here. Mandatory posting. This is another requirement. We previously discussed creating like an online inventory of short-term rentals. I think council was kind of, 50-50 on it, but ultimately what it came down to is the overall, staff's time to administer the program, constantly updating a database. This is something that could, be kind of a headache, kind of burdensome after a period of time. So now we are proposing that all short-term rentals actually post their license in a clearly visible space at the front door, visible from the street. If the short-term rental is located in a rear yard, they need to post a sign that has that sign showing so everyone can see it from the street. The license itself would include the license number, the year of the license, the operator's contact information, the maximum occupancy, and the contact information for the city's code enforcement office. The next that I'll go into, the next topic here is the amortization process. When you look at the two ordinances that are being proposed, they're almost identical except for the change, except for this section talking about existing non-conforming short-term rental operations. So in 23-24, council held several discussions on how to address short-term rentals in light of these different proposed changes. Initially, staff suggested a plan to phase out non-compliant short-term rentals over time. This is a similar process and approach taken on by the city of Cannon Beach and the city of Hood River. However, council decided to move forward with a proposal that would allow existing short-term rentals to continue operating without needing to follow these new rules. This is something informally known as grandfathering them in. Some community members, after this proposal, expressed concern over the grandfather approach due to some clustering that I discussed earlier that has appeared around town, where there's multiple short-term rentals popping up all within the same vicinity. I think from the information that we have, there is one short-term rental that has 4 short-term rentals all within 500 feet of it. So that is the clustering that we're talking about here. In response, council directed staff to explore the amortization process at that October meeting. All current short-term rental operators were notified of this proposal by email, dispatched November 12th. I do know it was a pretty quick turnaround from October to this meeting, so we wanted to make sure the information was available before this meeting. So tonight, council is considering 2 main options, which would be allowing short-term rentals to continue operating without meeting the new proximity and parking requirements, grandfathering them in, or adopting this amortization process. So under the amortization proposal, short-term rentals with a valid license as of December 31st, 2024, this year, would be allowed to apply for and receive a license annually as a non-conforming property until December 31st, 2029. Effective January 1st, 2030, these non-conforming STRs would then need to fully comply with these regulations. So it's a 5-year phase out for these properties to come into compliance. If a proposed short-term rental is within a proximity of an existing STR and other STR applications are submitted for that area, and we're discussing here January 1st, 2030, a lottery system that's currently being proposed and outlined in this ordinance, we would implement the lottery system. So after the lottery, any short-term rentals not meeting the proximity requirement would be required to cease operations. If an STR selected through the lottery system loses its license, the city may hold another lottery to select a new STR in that area based on applications submitted by November 29th of that year. So ultimately, November 29th, 2029, short-term rental operators submit their license. Staff determines whether or not there's multiple short-term rentals within that vicinity. All those operations are thrown into a lottery system. We select randomly through that lottery system. That individual may now operate. All the others in the area may cease operations. Keeping in mind, though, that one that's now operating must fully comply with the rules and regulations of this code, must be in good standing, and may ensure that they are not creating a nuisance, or they may have their license revoked, at which time we would go back to a similar lottery system and be able to select from those others that had applied to give them opportunity to operate. So notification of this meeting was provided on November 12th to all current short-term rental and bed and breakfast operators, including information of past conversations and links from our conversations in 2023 and 2024. Further, on November 18th, staff provided a link to this meeting to all short-term rental and bed and breakfast operators, as well as those who have different community members that have spoken over the past 2 years with concerns about this ordinance. with a link to the page to our council packet, encouraging their comments and participation. In addition to that, prior to the October meeting, there was notification sent out of short-term rental and bed and breakfast operators on September 13th. So we have been keeping operators informed. Now that our operators are all on email, it is so much easier to keep track of them than through the typical land use process of needing to mail everything out. So we were able to get quick responses. We have received some comments that are included in your packet, but I also believe on the dais there is another comment that was received for an individual representing one of our short-term rental operators. So council's alternatives here. Staff recommends council amend the city's short-term rental program by adopting either option A, which is general ordinance number 24-1407A, which includes all the modifications previously discussed at the October 14th meeting and includes the amortization process I just laid out. Option B is General Ordinance 24-1407B, which includes all those modifications from the October meeting, excluding the amortization process. So included on your staff, in your staff report here, we've laid out if council elects to adopt either option, there are multiple recommendations here to go with. And I am more than happy to answer any questions.
Okay, I'd like to, just questions, but I would like to have members of the audience who would like to speak on this issue address the council, but any quick questions for the staff before I invite members of the public forward? Okay. Mr. Steve Day, you'd like to address the council?
All right, thank you for letting me speak today. So I apologize in advance. Sorry, it's a little loud. If some of this is a little personal in nature, but given some of the misinformation out there, I think maybe I can help alleviate some of the concerns. Yeah, so Steve Day, I'm actually not a big corporation buying a bunch of properties in the West Scenic area. I am an individual and not a wealthy attorney, I think somebody described me as, from the big city in here doing whatever with the short-term corporate or short-term rentals. So I guess, you know, to tell you where I'm from, Pendleton. So if this is a little bit personal in nature, I apologize in advance. It's but I think it should help. But yeah, I'm from Pendleton. That's where I grew up. My family's from out here, Spray, John Day, Fossil. My mother, father, Spray High School. My mother actually went to the Dalles High School, graduated from here prior to going to nursing school. And my great grandfather's buried here. So this is kind of my backyard, and I've been buying properties here for, you know, probably 10 years. So I wanted to talk a little bit about that. Most of my properties they're long-term rentals, so 20 plus properties or doors that I have. And then the hub, you guys may be familiar with that, the Petty John building that I put the mural up. Maybe it's not to everyone's liking, but that was supposed to be a contribution for the arts and education. And so, yeah, I've been trying to put my best foot forward here and use local contractors and do everything I can. And I ended up buying, 300 West Scenic. And I saw some articles published and then went back and listened to some of the city council meetings and just kind of wanted to clarify some of those. Hello. Some of those things that were discussed, I saw there's a rock concert, there's golf carts and boats and, a number of different things. And as I was reading the article, I realized, wow, and the big corporation buying in there, I'm like, oh, they're talking about me. Well, I just want to let you know that was prior to these ever being Airbnbs or 300 West Scenic ever being an Airbnb. That was during a remodel phase where I did have a golf cart in the garage, and I did let my kids drive the golf cart in the yard, and there was dirt in the yard. It was all torn up. Some of you might remember the arborvitae that was planted. Everyone thought I was blocking my view, which was a mistake that my contractor made, trying to match the shrubs of the neighbor and et cetera. So there was the remodel phase, and my neighbor sorry, my contractor, he did have his boat parked in the driveway, which now I think can probably fit 10, 12 cars there. So parking shouldn't be a problem. Thanks, John. So anyways, I just wanted to clarify so that I don't have 6 Airbnbs. I have 4. And of the 20 properties, mostly long-term rentals, I have 3 or 4 that are corporate rentals that serve for the hospital for employees that are here for work for, a few months at a time. Doctors, nurses, some engineers, some energy workers, or people just in transition, moving from one house to another, doing their remodel or whatever it might be in their own homes. So I do have some of those. One of those is up in that cluster that you're referring to. Another one is 322, which had been sitting vacant for 5 or 6 years. And I went to the courthouse and I was the only one there at the auction that purchased that. And that is currently an Airbnb, considering selling that. So I could have 3 Airbnbs. And then I do have 2 next to each other that are adjacent, one behind 300 that originally, I thought that would be great to have that access between the 2. Potentially my mother could live there over time, just having optionality. And I did heavily invest in these properties. And so I would probably be hurt maybe more than most, not that it matters, but if we're doing a phase out amortization, that would be, pretty considerable. That it would hurt financially and otherwise. So I just wanted to kind of first clear that up and let you know who I am and why I'm here, and that all of these incidents that that I'd read about in the paper were a little bit shocking to me, and they were before any Airbnb. And I don't think we've had any problems since then, as Jonathan had mentioned, and they're with the police or otherwise. We did have a 75-year-old birthday party. That was the Wilcox family, and you can read the reviews. People that are staying in these places they're here to enjoy the mural festivals, the animation festival. They're very small, intimate gatherings. I thought we were providing a very unique experience for people to come to the Dalles and stay, commerce and other things that are related, and trying to drive traffic to local businesses. So I think then we had a 1-year birthday party, the 75-year-old birthday party. And then we did have a graduation party, but that was not an Airbnb event. That was local. That was us. And it did end at 6 o'clock. There were no teenagers drinking, but we try to address any concerns that people have. So, as I am, my youngest now of 3 he's a junior, graduating, going to go off to college. I plan on being out here more frequently and making this more of a permanent home. So I just at least wanted to address some of these concerns and let you know this. Yeah, I would be more for option B. So I think that's the right one. Yeah. No amortization. No, don't phase me out.
Okay.
Thank
Any
you.
questions for Mr. Day? Okay. We'll go back to Kevin Driscoll. And again, my apologies for interrupting you before.
My name is Kevin Driscoll. We live on East Scenic. Thanks for your time tonight, and thanks for staff time addressing this issue. Marlo, who I mentioned before, is a champion in the finance department. My family and I moved here about 1.5 years ago. My kids are here, being patient this evening. They go to school in the Dalles. We've chosen to make our home in the Dalles. We've also bootstrapped ourselves into 2 rental homes, which we do rent short-term about 25 to 35% of the year. The rest of the time is long-term rental. We bought these homes. We invested in the Dalles because we believe in the community. We invested in these homes because we hope to leverage them to fund our children's education and also give them a step up in the future. We don't come from money. We don't have an inheritance. This is strictly all earned. As far as the proposed legislation this evening, I would suggest a few things. First of all, I think the existing regulations are working. There's no substantiated proof that I can tell that the existing regulations are not working. We have a steady number of STRs. They've gone down a little bit in the last few years, as I understand it. Regardless, they're about steady. The taxes could be refined. There is certainly a private grievance with the prior gentleman who spoke and some homeowners who are adjacent to his properties. Other than that, which have not been substantiated, I might add, we have never had a complaint. Matthew gave me a call. One of my rentals is immediately adjacent to the city manager. He gave me a call one night. There was a trailer parked in front of his home for a few days. He asked me to move it. It was moved immediately. That is literally the only call I've ever gotten from our short-term rentals. We regularly check in with our neighbors. They consistently say there is never an issue. Our renters are quiet and they have no problems. All of our neighbors have our information. They're free to call, text us at any time during the day. The effect of the proposed legislation will put half of the existing short-term rental licensees out of business. It's very unlikely that they would be eligible for another license at the end of the 5-year term that is being proposed. Additionally, the 500-foot boundary is somewhat arbitrary. I don't understand where it's coming from, except for one comment back in September from a resident who was had an grievance with the previous gentleman. There's no precedent for that 500-foot boundary anywhere in the region. I mean, even a conditional use permit in the city requires a 300-foot notification. It's, in my opinion, with all due respect, this legislation is a hammer looking for a nail. It is the typical analogy, the baby being thrown out with the bathwater. I would suggest to the residents who are neighbors to the gentleman on West Scenic that they get in touch with him, they work it out together instead of airing their grievance in public forums, and they do the neighborly thing. I'm not really understanding why there's any reason, frankly, for all this effort. I'm over my time. I appreciate your consideration. I do urge the city council to exercise restraint here. Mr. Runyon described overregulation earlier. This is, in my opinion, a clear case of that. So thank you for your time.
Thank you.
May I ask one question,
Yeah,
Mr. Mayor? Thank you for your time, sir. Do you mind if I ask if your two rentals are within 300 or 500 feet of each other?
We would be affected by the 500-foot radius. In addition, I would say, if you look at that map, I'm not at all convinced if the 70 rentals that are proposed, 1% of the housing stock proposed in the legislation were placed equidistant from each other within the residential zone of the Dalles, I'm not even sure they would fit. And that's if they were perfectly placed.
Yeah.
So I know there's a rush. I know the moratorium ends tomorrow. I know there's some pressure to come up with a decision. I think you need to slow down, document if there are any actual violations here. I mean, the city code elsewhere says hearsay is not admissible as evidence. There needs to be direct evidence of a violation, and it has not been provided by anybody. Thank you for your time.
Sure.
Thank you. I just had a question about your business model. It sounded to me like you might be affected by what you said based on the fact if you stop being a short-term rental, you only have a certain amount of time to go back to it. So did you say that sometimes you're using them as short-term rentals, but the rest of the year you're using them as long-term rentals?
That's correct. Yeah, I mean, that's the other thing to consider here is there's been no one's reached out to this. You could find this in the TRT if the staff had time, but the majority of our rentals are long-term. That is correct. But about 35% of the time we do short-term rentals. Additionally, we do rent our private home. When we travel, we have family on the East Coast. We rent our home when we have to travel to visit family to offset travel expenses. Now, the reason, yes, that's true. A number of our rentals are over 30 days. Some of them come through Airbnb, and they will continue to come through Airbnb if this restriction were implemented. But yeah, we would be affected. We don't rent 100% of the time. It's not in our interest to rent 100% of the time, but it would absolutely affect us.
I appreciate that. I think we're all just trying to understand maybe unintended consequences. And I don't think anybody here was trying to like pick on one specific person. I didn't know Mr. Day or any of that stuff. I think we're just trying to, in general, make an ordinance that suits everybody as best.
You have one. You have one. It already exists, in my opinion.
Appreciate your feedback. That's really helpful.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Daniel Hines. Is he on Zoom? Okay. Mr. Hines.
Honorable Mayor, can you hear me in council?
Yes, please proceed.
Oh, thank you very much for your time, sir. I also have a short-term rental up on Esther Way. I wanted to just allow not so much for a face, but maybe just a voice to talk to some of these issues as well, especially poignant with, I can agree with our last gentleman that these things are quite big and impactful. A little bit about myself. I graduated from San Barlow High School. I used to teach snowboarding at Mount Hood Meadows. I went to Portland State University for my undergraduate degree in city planning. I opened a small brewery in Cascade Locks, and now I'm a brewer in Portland, Oregon. Probably around 3 or 4 years ago, I purchased a house along with my in-laws in the Dalles as a way to have a place where we could enjoy the sun. Growing up on the shady side of the mountain has really allowed me to appreciate the sun more. They're getting on in years and they really enjoy walking. You have a beautiful waterfront trail and lots of accessibilities to outdoors amenities. And we purchased a home, we remodeled. I spent a lot of time at Tumulum Lumber and working with local contractors. And having this as a short-term rental allows us to have people, frankly, stay in a house that might be vacant other months of the year when we are not there or not enjoying it. There are people around my neighborhood that leave their house empty. I'm hoping this looks maybe like a good deal. I'm not asking for 125,000 in kind of publishing for the Dalles, but in allowing people to stay at that home, they get to enjoy your beautiful downtown, your businesses, go to the breweries, eat wonderful food, go to festivals. To be honest, my motivations for getting a home there is that I love the Dalles. I would love in time to have my in-laws out there more, to enjoy the nice climate and the weather. Just not take all your time. I know you guys are having a very long day. I would also agree with the last gentleman. I feel that maybe with the focus on some of these bad actors, we have some immediate changes that feel like they need to be made. I not only pay taxes, but I help people come downtown. I help them share the beauty of your town as well as me being there. I think the 500-foot notification going from 11 houses, which is basically your neighborhood, to 65 homes seems kind of a little bit dramatic. I don't see any parallels in local regions to doing that. Also, the mandatory posting for me feels like it brings up somewhat of some safety issues. I wouldn't feel super comfortable saying like, hey, I might not be here all the time to anybody who drives by. I'm all for complaint reporting, but it feels in some ways that a lot of these initiatives are doing more than inviting reporting their requests and complaints by expanding so many people into the circle and having so many mechanisms. And just as staff has reported, there really aren't complaints or big issues. So yeah, I feel like this is pushing a little bit hard and fast. The timeline was pretty rushed in my personal opinion, but thank you so much for allowing me to speak to you about my concerns. Thank you so much for listening and thinking through these ideas. And I look forward to seeing you all on Thursday for the turkey trot.
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Hines? Okay, Lisa Sakala. Did I pronounce that right?
Chakala.
Chakala. Oh, that's close.
Good. Okay. Good evening, Mayor and City Council. My name is Lisa Chakala. I'm a resident of the Dalles and a short-term rental owner. And I'm here to provide voice to the value of STRs, short-term rentals, for our community, because up until tonight, I feel like that perspective has been lacking or underrepresented in the recent discussions. It was actually 11 years ago that I first made a trip to the Dalles, and that was renting an Airbnb. And I wasn't coming to the Dalles specifically. I was looking for a place to stay in the gorge, and it was the home itself that drew us to the Dalles. Just like I'm sure many people end up coming to the Dalles because of that beautiful home up on West Scenic. Once we were here, though, really enjoyed our stay. We, went downtown to the Sunshine Mill Winery. We went shopping and came back many times over following years, and ended up relocating here because we love it so much. And now we spend a lot of money as well, with our boys spending their weekly allowance at the Poke Shop and Brick City, and we're out all the time as a young family, contributing to the local economy. So the benefits of short-term rentals are tourism, again, bringing people here who might not otherwise come for a hotel stay. They're looking for a unique experience, and short-term rentals provide that. They spend locally, as I mentioned. We have a list of local restaurants. Our guests love that. They're like, thank you for providing that list. They go out, they eat at the restaurants. The tax revenue, obviously, that was spoken about earlier, which goes back to making the Dalles a more livable place for all of us. And what hasn't come up actually are supporting economic opportunities for people like our cleaners, maintenance, landscapers. So a lot of money goes into supporting other workers as well, local residents. I know that there have been a lot of concerns raised about short-term rentals, but I believe these are not reflective of the majority of short-term rental owners or their guests. We prioritize being a good neighbor. We're very reachable. We make sure all of our neighbors have our contact info, and we proactively ask them how it's going when we're around working on the property. And we hear time and time again, our guests are quiet, they're respectful, and they're hardly noticeable. And this isn't a new endeavor for us. We've been doing this for a decade. We rent our personal home. And over the years, we've hosted hundreds of people. We have great experiences. Like Steve mentioned, these are people coming for birthdays, for weddings, for births, for family traveling in for Thanksgiving. So I agree with a lot of the things in the short-term rental ordinance, maximum occupancy, being reachable, paying our taxes. But there are some things I wanted to call out. Proximity requirements, as you heard, would have a drastic impact on half of the currently operating short-term rentals, whether it's 300 or 500. And I think actually existing code exists to address the concerns that you've heard about from neighbors with the parking and the noise. So I'm not sure that there needs to be a perimeter. Perhaps revoke the license for folks who aren't abiding by existing code. But if a proximity limit is necessary, 100 feet is far more reasonable, because that would only impact 6 or 15% of currently operating STRs. Mandatory posting, I'm also uncomfortable with, as the last speaker mentioned, just posting our contact info and saying that this is a target when unoccupied. Tax collection, as Kevin mentioned earlier, totally on board with that. It's just a bear right now, and I think could be made easier. The parking requirements is impractical for off-street parking for each bedroom. That would require us to destroy some lawn to put in a parking lot. Seems like just enforcing existing parking regulations would suffice. If not, then perhaps fewer parking spaces or a limit on the number of cars that a guest can bring. And then to amortization, we've made a significant investment of time and money based on existing regulations, and we're looking at being shut down with the current regulations. I know we would go into a lottery system, but we are within proximity of one of the clusters. So chances are that we, very well might not be awarded one of those in 5 years' time. So as I mentioned, I think the city already has the tools to address the common complaints like noise and parking. And instead of over-regulating short-term rentals, I urge you to enforce existing codes and revoke licenses for repeat violators. For perspective, consider how the city handles the nuisance of barking dogs. Neighbors can file complaints, and issues are resolved without imposing proximity restrictions or lotteries for dog ownership. In addition, if additional time is possible, I definitely encourage the city to solicit broader community input. You're hearing from short-term rental owners today because we did hear about this on November 12th, as Joshua mentioned. But there are other short-term rental owners who I'm sure could provide perspective, as well as neighbors who have had positive experiences with short-term rentals, as well as downtown business owners who've had positive experiences from short-term rentals, as well as the workers whose livelihoods have been impacted by this industry. So I thank you for considering my perspective. And yeah, if you are going to adopt something tonight, I guess I would go for option B, but I do think it is more regulation than is necessary. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for Ms. Chikala? Thank you very much. Okay. Opening up for discussion, comments from the city council.
Are all of those people wanting to talk? Have they been?
Those are the only ones that signed up. Oh, Victor, you want to talk?
Victor Johnson, 313 West 4th. And I wasn't planning to speak, but I wonder if I could ask Josh a couple of questions. I wasn't sure if I followed on the fees. Those are going to go from $75 to $115. Is that what you said?
Yeah, that would be if the 500-foot vicinity requirement is established.
Okay, just on the 500.
Yeah.
So specifically like in the downtown area, if it's 100, that wouldn't.
Yeah, well, it would still impact. We did it on a base average for every property.
That's just on a new property, or is that on renewals also?
That would be every single year.
Every single year.
Yeah.
So for example, like if my place has 3 units, so to speak, there's a 3 times increase, but there's only one piece of mail being sent out. So it seems like, do
you have a 3-bedroom unit?
It's like 3 units in one property.
Yeah, so and each is 1 bedroom?
1 bedroom and 2 studios. One
so
bedroom,
you'd be looking at basically you'd be charged a cost for 3 bedrooms.
right? But there's, I guess I'm saying the mail is going to go up in 100 feet like $8 or something like that. But
The average cost, what we have is basically at 100-foot vicinity, the average cost we calculate is like $8 something.
okay, so it goes from 75 to 82 or whatever.
No, we would base it off of, we're not going to tack on the cost of every single short-term rental notice. We would take an average cost and increase that accordingly. So basically everybody pays into the same amount. If you have a property, if you have only 5 properties around you that are being notified, but then the neighbor down the street has 50 that are being notified, we're taking that average.
Gotcha. So it's going to go up for like a 3 place like mine. It's going to go up maybe like $100 a year.
It would go from, yeah. So it'd be like, 115 for each bedroom that you have.
Gotcha.
That's with the 500 foot.
That's with the 500
With the
foot.
300 foot, it would go from 75
to 90. Yeah. So all we're trying to do with this is recoup our mailing costs.
Yeah, and I'm not arguing. I'm just trying to understand it because there's a lot going on. So, and I would just say, it was me that brought up the 100-foot in the downtown area, and I still kind of like that. Thinking of the neighborhoods where there's like 7 or 8 houses in a row, and in my vision, I was thinking like in a block. I wasn't thinking like 100-foot radius. So if that gets adopted, maybe that's something that might need to be rethunk after a while. But I still like that in preserving those historic downtown neighborhoods. Thank you.
Well,
Thank you.
Yes.
option one, option two, existing ordinance, or what would be your preference?
Are you asking me
Yeah, I'm just as a property owner.
tonight as far as the phasing out or not phasing out? Is
Yes, that's option, I don't know yet, number
A.
one or two.
A.
And A and B.
Oh, which A is phasing out,
Yep.
B is not. So
Yep.
they're both identical except for the phasing out provision.
Correct.
Got it. So A or B, or leaving it with the current existing ordinance.
Well, that's a tough one on the spot. I
know.
can see a case for both, you know. Yeah, I'd have to think about it seriously. I haven't really thought about it because it doesn't affect me downtown. So I'd have to get back. I mean, I would hate to answer that
Okay.
like in the moment.
What I'm hearing from the previous three people, it seems like they were looking for either existing ordinance, or one said that they could leave with or live with the number two option or the B option. But it sounded like they were against the first option, which was amortization. And that answers those questions. I'd like to move on, but
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, just briefly, I mean, I could make a case either for and against for either of them. And so,
Victor, we've known each other for a lot of years, and I appreciate your input. That's why I asked.
yeah, well, thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. Yes, sir. Please, please identify yourself.
Good evening. My name is Kevin Ryan. Wife Julie is behind me. Julie and I were actually the first Airbnb operators in town. That was 13 years ago. We were the first permitted Airbnb, and we were the only Airbnb for 2 years in a row. So, and we have I agree with so much that has been said tonight. I think we have to be really careful about over litigating or over ordinates, you know, a larger ordinance than it's necessary. Don't fix a problem before it's occurred. Julie and I do a very, very intentional vetting of our guests over the years. Our goal has been to have zero impact on our neighborhood. Zero. No noise, no parking issue, no displacement of the neighbors in any way. We have a kind of a neighborly agreement in our neighborhood. By the way, we are owner occupier rental, short-term rental. So, and we always have been. We've been on the property while our guests are there. But we have a kind of a neighborly agreement with our neighbors that the space in front of your home is really your parking space. Now, of course, that's not legal and binding. That's not, you know, the law of the land, but it's just it's a consideration that we've extended to each other, and it's worked quite well. We like the others that have spoken tonight, communicate regularly with our neighbors, making sure that you know, and the main thing is we vet our guest, and we do that in a very specific way, and require explanation as to who they are, why they're coming here, and not, you know, 30 questions, but in a conversational way. And I've told not too many, but a good number of people over the years that I don't think our property is really what they're needing or looking for. And so I'll turn down a reservation probably once a year, maybe twice a year. Our season tends to go from just namely the summer months. And here's the reason why we got into this. First of all, the young people, younger generation was starting to show our world about a gig economy. And we didn't need to rely on corporate motels any longer. We could do person-to-person Craigslist type of stuff. That's where Airbnb had originated. And it's been quite a blessing for us. We raised 4 kids in our family. We were hand to mouth all those years. we did not have discretionary income to put away for retirement. Now we get to use our one main asset, our home, as a supplemental source of income. And it's not only, benefiting us, it's benefiting the city, it's benefiting the women that we hire to come and clean with us. We maintain our property. There's a lot of, I probably have spent over probably $175,000 at Home Depot since it opened on our home. Bottom line is, if there's not a lot of real problem showing up, then, be conservative about, writing new ordinances or new components to those ordinances. I agree. I think the existing ordinance is good. It's been good in our situation. I don't have any issue with it. If I had to vote for number 1 or 2, A or B, I would say certainly number B. I don't want to be forced out of business down the road because of a lottery or something like that, or proximity issues. I think it's legitimate to consider as a council and as a community planner. We don't want to get into a situation where there's corporations, which is unfortunately the case that has happened with short-term rentals, Vrbo and Airbnb. A lot of corporations have bought properties and they own 60, 100 properties. And, that's not necessarily a good situation for a small town like us. But I think we have to really look at this not at a large level, like a large city scale problem. We need to look at it as in our economy of, it's a small city, small town, and what really is necessary, what's going to be helpful for not only for neighbors, but also for the people that are relying on this type of income, and for some for really good reason. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Yes, Ms. Wakefield.
Thank you. Yvonne Pepin Wakefield, 3735 Clint Drive. I just have 2 quick questions. What do you do to differentiate between residential and non-residential? And how did you come up with the 100, 300, and 500 foot? How do you apply that?
Yeah, so the residential, non-residential is based off what zone it's located in. So if it's a residential zone, low density, medium density, high density, that's a residentially zoned property. Everything else would be non. 100, 300, 500. 100 was mentioned, recommended at a past meeting for commercial properties, so like our downtown. So we expanded it not only from the downtown district, we took a look at, why not including it in the other commercial zones that we have, the recreation commercial, as well as the general commercial zone. And the 500 is what's being proposed after discussions with council for residentially zoned. We just provided the 100, 300, 500 comparison just to show the overall impact of if either of those would be implemented. We wanted to show the overall impact of how many short-term rentals. Yep.
Thank you. Anybody else? Yes, sir.
My name's Randy Hamilton, and I grew up here in the Dalles, and I actually live right in the middle of one of the cluster of short-term rentals that has been talked about. And it's a topic that concerns me a little bit just because the house that I'm living in there, retirement plan wise, might be a short-term rental down the road. And if I'm not allowed to have that in that cluster of homes, that's really not fair in my opinion. And not to mention the impact that I've seen doing the short-term rentals on the neighborhood. I live in the house that my grandpa built back in 1955, and I've been around the neighborhood my whole life, and it's cleaned up a big way in the last 10 years. I mean, as a gentleman mentioned before, one of the houses was vacant for 5 years before it was bought and completely run down. And right now I'm surrounded by well-kept homes with nice lawns, and don't have neighbors with 6 cars and 2 campers and 2 boats year round. It's been a very pleasant experience, and all the interactions that I've had with short-term rentals, the tenants have been very positive. So wanted to mention that on your decision making.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
I'm Paul Peters. I live at 310 West Scenic Drive. And Randy just presented an eye opener there. Currently, I share a property line with 2 short-term rentals. And hear Randy say that would have been hopes for him. That would be a 3rd property line that I would share with a short-term rental. So I would be surrounded other than one side of my property. You know, and I hear everyone's history here in the Dalles, you know. I moved here in 1957. The house I live in now was built by my grandfather in 1948. My parents lived in this house. Now I live in this house. And so you talk about grandfathering things in. I mean, I'm the 3rd grandfather, literally, to live in this house. And now I've got newcomers that are potentially being grandfathered into the code. You know, it just strikes me in a bad way. And I think one thing that's overlooked a lot is this house was my retirement. I moved here when I retired, and I looked for the peace and quiet of a small town. And the large one next to me, throughout the weekends during the day, there's a lot of noise, but that doesn't count, apparently, with a noise nuisance. Even though I like to spend time in my backyard, I'm out there, and the occupancy thing is, I've brought that up in other meetings. You can tell there's not 10 people at the 300 address, just from the commotion that's going on. The cars that park in the driveway. And that house started out 4 bedrooms, and then the city granted them a 5th bedroom. So it went from 8 people to 10. And then the occupancy has always been in question. So it's just I guess the serenity that is typically broken. You know, I will give them credit. It's been better, but I guess you have to live there to really understand how it can be very annoying. And the serenity is broken. I've heard some things brought up by one of the previous speakers bringing up old news that I brought up a long time ago, and I was criticized for bringing up, you know, old instances. Now they're coming up today. So anyway, a little bit of hypocrisy there. Anyway, that's it.
Thank you.
My name is
Microphone, yes.
Sorry. My name is Tanner Dunbar. I am a local Wasco County resident. I guess you guys call entrepreneurs. I own multiple businesses throughout Wasco County. One of the biggest ones that I want to point out, and really just to kind of give you guys in depth of who I am, I own one of the largest property management companies in the Gorge.
We were actually voted the best property management board of the best property management company of the Gorge just a couple days ago through the Margie's Pot Shop outdoor store. So that should tell you guys that I actually care about my tenants. I'm an active landlord. I have a few long-term rentals in these clusters that you guys keep talking about. I did the due diligence. I took it upon myself to speak to my tenants that are in those long-term units. When I say long-term, they've been in there for shortest, I'm going to say is 2.5 years. Longest has been 11 years. All of my tenants have not said one concerning thing about these Airbnbs. I do work, I shouldn't say I work hand in hand with Mr. Steve Day. I am kind of their last resort. If they need help with something, I'm someone that they can call just because of how involved I am in the community. A few things that I want to fact check in regards to the other gentleman. The house at 300 Scenic was purchased as a 5-bedroom, properly egressed. It has the closets. It meets all the qualifications. That's inaccurate information. I want that on the record. Another thing is I was there during the involvement in the remodel of the 300 house. When I say there, I was really just a bystander. I was watching them, like remove trees and do landscape, things of that nature. Mr. Day mentioned arborvitae. He planted arborvitae. The neighbor complained about the arborvitae, was blocking his view. He didn't like it. He didn't like the curb appeal. They actually removed it to appease him. So I'm not a short-term operator, owner, anything like that. I do all long-term. What I'm going to say is that I think, to each their own. If they're following rules, they're following the compliance, they're not running rundown house. I have a neighbor, my direct neighbor has 5 cars in her driveway. Her house smells, it stinks, she has trash. Code enforcement's come out, numerous calls, numerous things. Nothing's being done about that. I'm a long-term resident, she's a long-term resident. Each their own, right? We kind of just look away. If there was drugs going in and out, broken down vehicles, like boats, things like that, that'd be a little more concerning at these short-term rentals. Like everyone has said, and all these owners have told you guys, is they're bringing an experience to the Dalles. They're bringing people in to eat the food, to, come out, stay. They're doing the winery tastings. They're going to Maryhill. They're doing everything. Mr. Gomez in the beginning shared a video, and one of the voiceover, I don't know who it was speaking, but mentioned the arts. A few of those clips in there were actually a building that belongs to short-term rental owner and operator. And so that's just one of the things, is like people are bringing things to your guys' community, not your guys', but our community, I should say. And I think that if you guys have to move to adopt, I personally would choose option B. If it was up for community debate, I personally would choose B. I think let them operate. There are a few things, I agree. There should be some standards maybe, such as how many people per unit, things like that. Safety is a big concern for me. I don't agree with posting on the front door. Again, it's a target, like some other people have said. I'm a father of 2 girls. My ideal goal is to pass down my properties to them. And I'm just kind of thinking of that. If I had to require my daughters to post their public or their personal information to the public, that'd be very concerning. That's just right there waiting to happen. A few other people that we work with, specifically, let's talk about 300 Scenic. That unit is empty often. There's trespassers on there constantly. We have multiple cameras that are monitored throughout the night. It's documented. I mean, you guys go to the city police, you guys go to anything else. There's documents of our break-ins where we're calling, we're doing our due diligence. We're protecting our neighbors, informing them like, hey, there's people that have swam in our pool, that have used our hot tub, that are naked in our driveway. That's not us. That's not our guests. I shouldn't say our guests, their guests. That's people. That's the community. That's just what's happening. We have some neighbors, they have some neighbors, I should say, these short-term rentals they don't care. The neighbors don't care. They're here to tell you guys that we care about our house and we want this. I think that's all a front for you guys. I don't think that's accurate. We have other incidents where I personally have seen a complaint, or I shouldn't say complaint, a notice from a guest about the neighbor throwing rocks over her fence at some young kids. That's documented. We document all of these things with the proper channels to ensure that the guests have essentially an enjoyable experience. But these people that are saying there's loud parties, there's cars in the parking lot, those are unfounded. And I mean, I forgot your name, I'm sorry, but he voiced that. I mean, the Dalles City Police has very minimal complaints on these Airbnbs. These are people's livelihoods, just like every day. I mean, breadwinners for everyday people. So I think that there's some miscommunication. I agree with, I think she was the second or third person that spoke, is I think there's a lot that you guys have to look into. And I don't think that just telling you guys option A or option B, you guys have to choose, is adequate enough. I think there's a lot of logistics that go into these. I think that you guys should really take the time, if you guys are able, to read into both options, because there is consequences, there is benefits for each, but which one really is the lesser of the two evils?
Thank you very much.
Of course.
I will point out that, as Josh indicated, this is the fourth or fifth meeting we've had on this. So I think that both of these options, certainly option B has been thoroughly vetted by the city council. Okay, last call. Okay, city council, let's deliberate. Comments, questions?
Before we begin.
I'll start the ball rolling. I want to raise this issue that's been raised a few times about the posting. On the staff report, page 160, second bullet point under mandatory posting. Second paragraph, however, you with me, Josh?
Yep.
Rather than maintaining that online database, staff now recommends a more effective approach for concerned neighbors by requiring all STRs to prominently display their city-approved license near the front door, blah, blah, blah. You use the word more effective. What is more effective about posting something? And from the street, you think people would be able to read it from the street?
Well, if you have a concern with an operation, you can go to the front door and get that information for the operator. I mean, this information is not private. Anyone can reach out to our department and get the contact information. We looked at it as more effective because it's, I think I've been pretty clear this whole time through of the past 2 years we've been talking. Some neighborhoods, neighborhood policing themselves in these types of situations, the neighborhood connection, we kind of lost it in years. But if you have an issue with the neighbor, if you have an issue with an operation, this provides you the information to walk over. If you do not have your neighbor's phone number, you can get the contact information right there. Effective in the sense that every single time to have an updated online database, that's the one thing where it's just an additional administrative step for the short-term rental program. If we have, and we approve a license, 2 licenses this week, 3 more the next week. We're just constantly going through to make sure we have an updated list. So this is just kind of provides that information so it's readily available, as well as the contact information for the city's code enforcement office.
So your problem with the online thing is staff, the impact on the staff.
Ultimately, yeah. I mean, operating the short-term rental program, there's, it's a $75 a year. There's not a lot of, we don't really look at it as a revenue for the city. And it's just, it can be monotonous for the administration side sometimes.
Thank you. Other questions? Councilor McLaughlin.
Well, I've been working on this because I live at 328 West 21st, which is within all of these folks are my neighbors. So I've been hearing on that side, plus I made contact with Mr. Day upon hearing, and my involvement was to calm the waters and to find some resolution so we could coexist until we could get an ordinance in place. Originally, Dr. Ryan, yes, you were one of the first, and at those days, we only had small requests for Airbnbs originally, and I think I was on the council slightly after that. So at that time, it didn't pose the kind of issues that we're seeing later with the number of Airbnbs that surfaced. So that's what prompted us to come back and take a look at. We did put a moratorium in place to kind of prevent, and that seemed to work if everyone. We also looked at putting a cap on the number, which we have currently 47 and how many, 72 or?
Yeah, 71.
The low 70s. Yep. So we established a cap. So we won't go beyond that in order to expand the number. Then we were, one of the things we're restricting the noise and complaints of noise. And so we looked at the curfew of 10 o'clock and enforcing that. So if a party goes beyond the 10 o'clock curfew, then police would become involved and deal with that issue. Parking limitations, that one still is ongoing, but the majority of parking in the area has subsided. I think originally the communication we established between the two parties, or many of the parties, resolved many of those issues. So everything lowered. I think everyone would agree that it has been better in the last year. And we identified and we worked together as neighbors, right? So we also had a request for the city to enforce civility between residents and owners. And that's something that's beyond our capability. That's something that has to be self-regulated, is civility between people. So the other night I did some research, which, if you know, I'm an educator, long-time educator, and I went on to the comment section on 300 Scenic Drive. I found 165 comments. Of those 165, 2 of them were negative. One of them, the manager of the property responded to the people. After they left the property, it was in disrepair and garbage was left, and they were isolated and told not to reapply or they would be denied. So I know that compliance on that area is being done. I have evidence of that. So I'm saying that would enter into some of the decision, is that many of the things, yes, we've had some issues. We've addressed many of those issues. And now what we're trying to do is establish some guidelines, an ordinance, so that we can all exist. And then if we have differences, we have mechanisms to identify and take action to hopefully resolve those before it gets into a serious level of uncivility. Maybe that would be the right thing to say there. So I also want to talk a little bit about, I have been involved, and this is a question for our attorney. I do have a rental facility at the hub, which is one of the managed properties. And I have had interactions with both parties, with Mr. Day and with the residents. I attended a meeting on a Sunday with many of the residents, and they basically had the opportunity to sharing with me. So I want to let you know that I made I said nothing that would impugn the city or put us into jeopardy. I never took sides. I'm attempting to be as fair in this decision. And therefore, I'm asking you, with knowing that, if it would be wise or smart to recuse or.
Well, I'm not your lawyer, Tim.
No, but in this case, this would be an action that.
I think the city council rules, which this council adopted relatively recently, but didn't include anything earth-shattering when it came to government ethics, have some provisions on that. I know Councilor Rendell just signed those rules tonight, and so maybe there's a copy floating around that our city clerk can hand to you discreetly as we talk.
Tim, do you have any, I'm sorry to interrupt you, Jonathan, but I'm going to cut here. Do you have any financial stake in the outcome of this decision?
Well, only then my rates might be increased. I don't know. But
do you have a strong
if
personal?
I decide one way or another,
yeah,
I'm certain that, no, I'm not certain. I don't know. I think that people that know me know that I work above board, and I think everyone that I've talked to would agree. However, there could be one person that would question the outcome of tonight's decision.
Sure.
And so in that respect, I would head off any kind of criticism if I just recuse myself from the vote. I feel I can make a just and unbiased opinion, but I'm not certain everyone else would feel that way. So I'm just saying that.
Sure. I mean, the ethics rules in Oregon are actually pretty straightforward, and you can think about this yourself, and whatever decision you make is your decision. But if you have an actual conflict of interest as a public official, you must recuse yourself, step off the dais, disclose it at the start of the conversation. and all official actions, you shouldn't participate if you have an actual conflict of interest. If you have a potential conflict of interest, you can participate in the decision making as a public official. You still have to disclose it at the start of the conversation, and sort of state the nature of the conflict of interest that you believe that you might have. In all cases, the difference between an actual conflict and a potential conflict is whether the public official would have a financial benefit, in which case it's an actual conflict of interest, and if, as opposed to could have a financial interest, in which case it's a potential conflict.
So recusal means leave. Abstention would be to stay and not have an input in the vote.
Nope, there's no difference generally between, well, there might be some, semantic difference between recusal or abstention, but effectively in both cases, I believe the ethics law requires the disclosure of the conflict, the nature of the conflict. If it's an actual conflict, that public official must abstain from the vote and recuse themselves from the meeting.
Jonathan, under Oregon ethics rules, the conflict is a financial one, right? It's not that you happen to know somebody or have had a conversation.
Correct. Friendships are not conflicts. Affiliations are not conflicts. A pecuniary interest for a public official or their family members or anybody living in the same house as them, and financial benefit can either be a financial gain or the avoidance of some sort of financial detriment. In both cases, it has to be financial.
Okay, any other questions or comments? Councilor Runyon. You're muted.
All right. Got me now? I think.
Yep.
Lost my video. Here we go. All right. In some ways, I feel like when this all started with our multiple meetings over the last couple of years, we were kind of led down a path by the one cluster. And since then, and in fact, I'm on vacation in another state and spent the last all of today and most of yesterday rereading letters that go way back, minutes from our previous meetings on this subject, and listening tonight. One thing in one of the letters, and I think that was our PhD that spoke to us a little bit ago. Can't remember her name right offhand here. Nice lady. Raise the fee. There's one thing. We shouldn't be afraid to charge a little bit more to round it off to an even number to make sure we are taking care of business. Beyond that, we have, as was pointed out tonight and what I came to as a conclusion early this morning, we have rules and regulations in this city already for parking, noise, etc. after certain hours and before certain hours. We have these rules. Do we need new rules on top of those? That's another discussion, I think. I'm not, we went from 300 to 500, etc. While I've been on this vacation today, I spoke with some folks in a town about the same size as the one we're in, and they happen to know about Airbnbs. I don't know about them. I don't own one or don't participate in one. I think I'm going to start thinking about looking at those for vacation time. I don't think that, I think 500 feet is now, that's overkill. I went along with it before in the discussion, but it was based on the parameters that came to us. I think that is overkill. I'm not even sure about 300. Somewhere between 100 and 300 might be the answer based on the average lot size, which seems to be from 50 feet in width to 75. Some are 100. But Josh could probably tell us more what the average lot size is as far as the width. I don't want to see us using, I heard the word radius tonight. We had that word brought into a discussion not that long ago that turned out to be not correct. And I don't want to have us using the word radius in any description of distance. It just doesn't work out. And let's see, I had a couple other things here I'm trying to remember. Anyway, existing rules cover, we have code enforcement, we have law enforcement, we have fire department rules, we have parking rules. We have a lot of this on the books already. The other thing is, from my reading and whatnot over the last several months, you know, the people that operate, is it Airbnbs or Airbnbs? I don't even know. I hear Airbnb, so I'll say that. The people that are doing that kind of a business with their home they live in or ones they've purchased, they're not housing the homeless. We're not bringing a bad element per se into the majority of these neighborhoods. These are people that, as was pointed out tonight, are families, they're tourists, they're coming here to see what we've got. And I can appreciate that. If it was, you know, another annex being built or something like that, I might have other concerns. But I don't really have concerns with these operators because I think by and large they have an investment and they want to maintain it and they want to have the best clients they can have. I own my own business for 25 years, and that was my role. If somebody was a bad actor in my business, you know, I said, well, you know what? I have other clients. I didn't take everybody that came through the door, and we've heard that expressed here tonight. So I'm not going to vote for 500 feet. If that's going to be one of these two and 500 feet's in it, I'll be voting no on both of them. Between the two, as they're written, I'm not going to go for the amortization and put somebody out of business at this point. But I think there's a way to do our policy where we've done it before, where there's reviewal time upon it, where we can come back. We're not locked in. We can come back with the changes we have made and review them in 6 months or a year. So there are ways to do that. I know there are. So I guess that's all I've got. If I read my scribbles a little further, I'll try to put my hand up again. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else?
Yeah, Mr. Mayor.
Council Randall.
I think the main concern on both sides, I think, is the proximity, the issue of proximity. And I agree with Councilor Runyon that 500 might be a bit too far. I'd be more agreeable to a 300 foot. Also, I think a lot of the speakers tonight dismissed the concerns of the residents in the adjoining or nearby these STRs, but they were disturbed enough to be motivated to show up here on several occasions to speak before the council. So I think their concerns are real. Maybe perhaps exaggerated. I think when you live next to something such as STR, you become hyper vigilant. You start looking for things you can be offended by. So I recognize that. But I don't think we should dismiss their concerns. I live across the street from a short-term rental referred to earlier this evening. And I do notice different types of activities. I think there's a different rhythm of that type of operation going on in a residential house. So I recognize the concerns of the neighbors who do cherish their tranquility and their homes that they've lived in long term. It's a tricky situation we have here, but again, if we do adopt one of these ordinances, I believe the 500 foot radius area, if you will, is probably something we need to curtail a little bit and go back maybe to 300.
Okay. Anybody else?
I have a few thoughts.
Dan, could you speak up?
Sure,
Sometimes
Rich.
it's tough to hear you. So
I rarely get that from people in my life. Thank you for that. I don't know if concern is the right word. I wish it were easier or more legally feasible for us to differentiate between owner occupied and non-owner occupied. I'm told that may run afoul of something called the Commerce Clause in the United States Constitution. So we need to be careful there. Because I do think there's a difference between someone who rents out a room or a house that's their primary residence or where they, live on site, and then somebody that, or a corporation that might have multiple, investments. So that's something that I don't know that I have a resolution for, but it is a frustration. I could go along with a 300-foot buffer. I think that's prudent. One of the things we're trying to do is to get ahead of having lots of neighborhood conflicts, not just one neighborhood conflict, and diluting the presence of STRs is one way to do that. We hope, we think, and that's the buffer idea. Having read through and thought about and then listened to comments, I'm increasingly disinclined to support a mandatory posting. I think that we could get that information, it's public information, and we could make it available through a number of other ways, to the tax parcel site the county hosts online, or we could have our own list. I recognize your concerns there, Josh, but were we to go forward with putting our own list online, we needn't, guarantee that it's going to be update, to the day. People can be a little tiny bit patient if we updated it monthly or something. I'm uncomfortable with the lottery system. I appreciate the staff working out and following council directive to help explore these things. But thinking about it just leaves me a little uncomfortable. I don't think that's, even if it's something that we could stand by legally, I just don't feel that it's necessarily proper. So I'm increasingly disinclined to phase out existing businesses. The one thing that I think we need to be clear about in the ordinance is the very real teeth that we're presenting for a site that were to violate noise rules repeatedly. We're proposing to make it very clear that that could result in losses of license through a code enforcement action. And I hope that people are paying attention enough to realize that at least the currently elected council is pretty serious when it comes to code enforcement. So if there were a problem site that were an ongoing issue, I think they would be in real jeopardy of losing their business license or their STR license. So I'd like to pass an ordinance, but I would like to amend it down to a 300-foot buffer, to strike the mandatory posting, and maybe have some conversation among ourselves tonight or going forward about the fee schedule. I'm fine raising the fee to cover a wider notification. I want to be thoughtful about the fee structure, though, so that we're not. Well, I guess I just want to ask, does it discuss with me for a moment, Josh, how it makes sense to have a fee per bedroom rather than per site?
It is, it's something that we adopted in 2020.
Okay.
Ultimately, I think we looked at it on this case that you can rent a studio in the back of your property, 1-bedroom studio. You can rent a 5-bedroom house. So we looked at the way to look at it, the way that we, structured it. It's just based on basically overall size. We could do it on a site where we would just, want to show, maybe we would want to scale it. Maybe we don't. Maybe it's a cap at an overall site. We can do it either way, but the council's direction in 2020 was to we move forward with a per room basis.
So the larger the site, the more the license.
Yeah,
fee.
effectively.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we cap it at 4 bedrooms. So even if you have a 7-bedroom home, we're charging you as a 4-bedroom. It caps at 4.
Thank you. And again, I want to be clear. I appreciate the diligent and thoughtful work that I know that multiple staff members have put into bringing these options to us. It's, I think Councilor Randall said, it's a tricky one. It is a tricky one.
Josh, is there any other, excuse me, alternative to this mandatory posting besides a highly maintained website and posting on the front door, which I got to tell you, I have a real problem with that too. Is there something else we can do for accountability and?
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, it's this type of posting. Just a heads up. This type of posting is not unheard of.
Yeah.
City of Hood River uses a very similar one. You can see it walking down the street. You can see the post in the front of somebody's house. So it's not just something we're grabbing for straws on. But we currently require that the maximum occupancy is posted at the front door, inside in a conspicuous place. So ultimately, when you rent, you know how many people you can have there. Of course, this is all self-policing, but how the code currently reads is we do require a posting at the front door. It could continue that way, and we wouldn't have to have a posting. I would really just encourage not having to update an online database.
Well, and just to add, if someone is curious about getting contact information about a short-term rental that's nearby, they can directly contact the community development department for that contact information.
Correct.
It's just
They
not
could.
publicly available at your fingertips through a database on the website.
Yep.
You can pick up the phone and call or email.
Yeah, and it's, just like I said, it's not, this is also the mandatory posting is a practice used in some cities. Also, this online database is a practice used in other cities. So there is so many options out there and how short-term rental licenses and programs work throughout the country, throughout the world, and it's really up to council to tailor fit something that works for the city. And we are here to help you, guide you through the process.
Well, I absolutely oppose having owner-occupied STRs have to post. I think that we need to be mindful about that. It's maybe different if it's strictly a business or an investment site versus an occupied site where they're renting out a studio or a room or what have you.
Mr. Mayor, I just wanted to confirm. I don't know if Councilor Runyon has his hand raised again or if he didn't take it down.
I do.
Okay.
Go ahead, Rod.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just, in fact, Councilor Richardson brought up something I was going to ask about, because until Victor Johnson spoke today, somehow I had missed that it was per room rather than per site. And I don't know where I missed that at. Have we talked about that? I just really hadn't recalled it. And all of a sudden it's per bedroom. And I guess we've been doing that according to what Josh said a few moments ago, but I didn't really put it together previously or with this. And I just wonder how that works. But if we're doing it already and charging per room, then I guess, we don't need to change things. But if we're not really doing that, I don't know that I want to do it that way. So Mr. Chandler can answer that. And the other thing I'll leave with is that, as several pointed out today and at some other meetings and in some letters, there are according to the police department, we don't have, other than the one that Tim talked about, Councilor McLaughlin, we don't have any complaints or legal issues on the books from our local Airbnbs. So, just makes it tougher to think about doing more regulation and maybe over-regulation on things that aren't really happening. And again, we can always revisit. So that's all I've got.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, and I can answer the question. We are, it's a per room basis, Councilor Runyon. So we would, just recommend continuing it. The other thing we do carve out with these changes is, past conversations, there was this discussion on what a bedroom is. So we just clarified with a new, there's a definition that we added into this ordinance,
Yeah.
a definition of a bedroom, a definition of a studio. Both of them, a studio would be charged as a one bedroom ultimately. So just some clarification there.
Well, I saw the clarification on the bedrooms, that whole section and whatnot, but I didn't put it together with price.
Okay.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, I just want to clarify on the city's annual fee schedule, which the city attorney's office is in the process of preparing for next year, which we usually bring to council in January. It's described the by bedroom price for every short-term rental license, and it's been something that council's looked at and reviewed every January since, well, January 2021. Yeah.
Okay. Well, let's maybe cut to the quick here a little bit. Is there anybody on the city council that would like to make a motion or prefer ordinance A? Not seeing any hands raised. Okay, so now we're down to option B, or do nothing, or some semblance of, now it's been suggested that maybe we go with B and revise the 500 feet down to 300 feet.
I think it's also striking the mandatory posting.
And striking the mandatory posting, but there's no other, yeah, and then we rely on phone calls to community development if people have questions or complaints.
Yep, give us a call.
Walking up to the front door, right?
Yep, give us a call.
Okay.
Well, the ordinance, I feel, Mr. Mayor, does a lot of work and does a lot of tightening and clarifying. So I'd hate to not follow through on that. So let me see if I can take a stab at this. I'll move that we adopt general ordinance. Make sure I'm doing the right one here. 24-1407B. Is that option B, grandfathering? As presented with the following amendments, striking the mandatory posting and reducing the buffer from 500 to 300 feet by title only.
And as a clarification to that, we would be reducing the buffer not only for the vicinity requirement, but also for the notification requirement.
Oh, good point. Thank you. No, I meant the vicinity requirement only from 500 to 300.
That for residential, or is keeping the 100 feet for?
Correct. Yes.
Got it?
Got it. Yeah.
You want it, what, for the record, what, read it back or repeat, or somebody should do it.
I didn't hear a second for the motion.
Anybody want to second Dan's motion?
I'll second it.
Okay. It's been moved by Counselor Richardson and seconded by Counselor Randall to adopt General Ordinance 24-1407B as amended and described by our city attorney.
No, as described by Councilor Richardson, but I just want to be clear that the city's charter requires typically an ordinance to be approved in a single meeting. The city clerk will send out, we have some certain requirements that has to be posted, a week before the meeting and all that. The other requirement is that it's adopted unanimously by council at the first meeting. And if it's not, then that's okay. The ordinance can survive and be adopted by council at a second meeting. And these substantive modifications are, great feedback for staff, and we can certainly write that up exactly as described. I would just say, in order for this ordinance to be adopted by council at its next meeting, there should be, an actual vote on that motion. And the motion language can be exactly as Councilor Richardson described. It's basically it's listed as number 3 on page 162, and it was seconded, and so it's definitely on the floor. If there's any further council deliberation on that, please, now's a great time. But at the end of that, if you could call the vote, Even if it is unanimously adopted, it needs to come back at another meeting per the council's rules because of the substantive changes.
And the moratorium date would not be affected?
The moratorium can be handled separately. It will not be affected. It's part of a council resolution, but a council resolution is just the formalization of council's will. And we can, as needed, extend the moratorium. If that's what council would like to do, we can do that by motion after this because there's already a motion on the floor.
Does anybody feel they need a further explanation or description of the motion by Councilor Richardson?
One question.
Councilor Runyon?
I'm good with the motion as such. One of the things I mentioned when I talked earlier was because we're new to this whole thing, the need for a review down the road. Is that something we need to put into this motion, or is that just part of what we can do 6 months, a year from now, take a look at it again? Or should we put it in this ordinance?
That's up to council, if you're asking me. The ordinance is, administratively, look, the city manager and I will ensure that whatever council's intent here is will be followed through on regardless. But council can certainly include it in the ordinance. There's not a tremendous amount of practical benefit to that, but it can be, as official as it gets if you want to do it that way. But I can promise the council that if a majority of the council would like us to, we can bring this back every month for the next 12 months if you all want to.
No, it's okay.
Yeah, I could leave it out of there, but I'd just like to put it in the heads of the city manager and so forth that a year from now, I'd like us to at least review what has happened legally and regarding the changes to see how we're doing.
Rather than make it part of the ordinance, why don't
Right.
we just make
Yeah,
it part of the
exactly.
minutes and the public record that the city council's consensus is that the staff bring this back before us an evaluation of the of what has been happening, say, 12 months from now.
How about 12 months from adoption, which won't be tonight?
Okay. Is that okay with everybody?
Yep.
Yep.
Could I make one recommendation? This mandatory posting, not posted outside, but something that would be posted on the interior. If we strike this out, our current code reads that maximum occupancy license needs to be posted inside. We took that out with this current mandatory posting. So the mandatory posting section could almost stay intact aside from stopping at the first sentence where it says "and visible from the outside."
Page
Strike
number,
that
Josh.
through to the very last.
Page
This
number.
is page 190, and this is section J. So it could read, all short-term rentals must prominently display the approved city license near the front door. The approved city license must include yada, yada, and it lists everything that needs to be included with that license. That basically strikes it out for the concerns that we heard, making it so that it's not posted outside, but it's still something that's at the front door. So guests and anybody that comes can see this information readily available to them.
Councilor Long?
Yeah, I just had some questions and my computer was possessed, so now I can't search anything. But what are the enforcement actions with the ordinance that the motion is made on? Are they strict enough to take someone's license away if they're a repeat offender? I can't see it. I'm sorry.
Yeah, so what we did is there's the revocation process is still outlined. We still have, I'm not sure if we added too much to the revocation process. What we did is expanded the complaint process. So expanding the complaint process, I think there was some, maybe some frustration, some confusion that it has to be in written form. We wanted to be very clear, written form, email, submitting on the city's website, and encouraging as much information as possible so we can look into these allegations.
Correct. But once there are if the allegations are substantiated, is it clear enough in here to indicate when action is going to be taken, or is that subjective?
It's a flexible approach, Councillor Long. A license, once it's issued, may be revoked by the planning department, by the planning director, frankly, and we list them there, A1 through 6. Presumably that's what Matthew is showing you now. We have, upon evidence establishing that the property has violated any provision of any of our code, but even specifically this part of our code, that is sufficient on its own for the director to make the decision to revoke the license. But any decision of the director to revoke the license is appealable to the city council, so long as that an appeal is timely filed. I believe it's with the city attorney within 10 calendar days of whenever the planning director provides that notice to the former licensee. If an appeal comes in, basically saying, "Hey, I think my license was revoked unfairly, and this is why," that's something that I'm obligated by this draft at least to submit to council. In which case, we'll have a quasi judicial public hearing. They'll come to council at the next meeting and state their case, and ultimately, council's decision is final.
Thank you.
Yeah, and just to be extra clear, it doesn't require any. There's no judicial review here. This is just the city's decision to revoke a license. But if you violate a provision of the code, of this chapter specifically, let's just talk about this chapter specifically, by, let's say, operating without a license to begin with, in which case there's no revocation. You're just doing something against our charter, or I'm sorry, against our code. Well, that's subject to the municipal court. Violation is $250 a day, and every day that you continue to do it is another violation, and it continues every day that you're doing it. And so there's that traditional codes enforcement mechanism. I'll work closely with the planning department at enforcement for operators without licenses. But if you have a license, that's the city's decision. Doesn't require any municipal court or anything like that. It's just the planning director's decision. Yeah.
Okay, are we clear on the motion that has been seconded?
Let me make a refinement or clarification. So on mandatory posting, page 190, you're proposing that, Josh, that we just strike "and visible from exterior."
As well as the next sentence, and then keep the final sentence.
Visibility from.
Can I just make a recommendation, Councilor Richardson?
Yes, please.
I think I understand perfectly what council's intent is with the motion and the second, and with the planning director's expression here, that we can just simply remove a couple words. I can wordsmith it. Council will have the opportunity to review this at the next meeting.
All right. Thank you very much. So the motion as presented would allow existing operations to continue. New operations would have be subject to perhaps a little bit stricter parking and 300-foot vicinity buffer to try and dilute any concentrations in other neighborhoods or further concentration. And mandatory posting would be eased, and the vicinity buffer would be 300 feet, not 500 feet. Is that clear to everybody?
It is.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, can we vote now? All those in favor of the?
Wait, may I make? I have reviewed the ethics, and based on the ethics in state law, it says financial gain, conflicts of interest. I violated none of those. It says seeking actions benefiting special interest groups at the expense of the city. I have not done that. Understand that I witnessed a violation of ethics many years ago, and it could have been avoided by just asking these questions before the vote. That's why I did what I did. I feel like I can answer or I can vote without bias and be truthful. Now, Mayor Mays.
Thank you. Is there anybody here that would like to see the ordinance read in its entirety, all 9 pages?
Oh.
Hearing no preference for that, I would like to ask the city clerk to please read the ordinance by title only.
General Ordinance number 24-1407B, an ordinance amending the Dalles Municipal Code, Chapter 8.02, short-term rental licenses.
All those in favor, please say aye or raise your hand.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. I'd just like to say in closing that I think this process has served to educate and enlighten the six of us and the staff about short-term rentals. And the issue of that, I do think the residents did and do have some legitimate issues regarding the viability of their neighborhoods. We're glad that they came forward. Most of all those issues have took place a year and a half ago or so. And I think that things are much improved in all the neighborhoods, thanks to the responsible short-term rental owners who have appeared here tonight, for example. And I'd like to thank the 9 of you that got up and spoke and gave your input. And with that, I'm looking.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
I just wanted to touch base on the question that you had asked me earlier about the moratorium, and if council would like to extend it, I think now would be a good opportunity before, which I was going to guess we're going to break for a recess.
Okay, what are you recommending?
If council has any interest in expanding the moratorium, we could do that by motion.
If there's no need to.
I also agree that there may not be a need to, but just wanted to remind you and the council that council actually didn't adopt any ordinance tonight. It needs to come back for another meeting, which it will at the next meeting. Well, if maybe the next meeting or the meeting after, we'll have to talk to the city manager and the city clerk on scheduling. But yeah, we'll draft it up exactly as directed, which we appreciate as staff. But if council has a need to expand the moratorium to cover that, gap, that can be done by motion. And just as a reminder,
anybody want to do that?
Yeah.
If I may ask a quick question, the moratorium was established by resolution prior. Are we crafting a document to go along with that, or?
You could just direct me to prepare one. Not you, but, a majority of the council. You could try, just as a reminder for council, the moratorium established a prohibition for the planning department to issue any new short-term rental licenses that are non-owner occupied in residential zones for a 12-month period, which is set to expire tomorrow. I don't know how big of an issue that is today. I'd be very comfortable with this resolution coming to term tomorrow. But if council has a desire, I'm just here to tell you that you could do it by motion.
I don't see anybody jumping up and wanting to do that.
Rod is.
Oh, there's Rod. Go ahead, Rod.
Somebody asked, so.
It would, I think it would be doing an injustice for us to not extend the moratorium until we actually pass this ordinance, which is, we've been just told it's not in effect until it comes back to us. I think the moratorium needs to stay in effect. And not that there's 200 people out there waiting, but maybe there is. I don't know. So I would like any new ones to come in under our new rules. So I would say, I would like to give him direction, in my opinion, to extend the moratorium and prepare the resolution. That's just me.
If we do extend the moratorium, I'd like to ask the city attorney how many, or the city manager, how many days we need to extend it.
Well, if we adopt it in a December meeting with 30-day or under emergency, there are two options there.
Yeah.
I think worst case scenario would be
January 9th.
I was going to say January 9th or the end of January, just to be on.
We could just make it contingent on the city council's adoption or the effective date of the general ordinance. Yeah.
Yeah.
So.
Okay, would you like to make that motion, Councilor Runyon? What our city attorney just said?
I would
extend them. Go ahead.
If we need a motion for it, I would make a motion to extend the moratorium until the adoption of or non-adoption, till the adoption of the ordinance that we've passed here a moment or two ago.
How about
do you want to date January, our January meeting, or do you want a date?
Yeah, we could set it for the effective date of the ordinance, which is 30 days after adoption. And how about in any case not to extend past, call it April 2025 in the event that council elects for whatever reason at the next meeting not to adopt the ordinance that you all unanimously just adopted.
What he said.
All right. It's in the record.
Is there a second?
Yeah, I'll second that.
Okay, it's been moved by Council Runyon and seconded by Council McLaughlin to extend the moratorium as previously described. Is there any more discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you all very much. And now, before we get to our last item and then our executive session, we need to pass a motion that extends the.
No, we don't need to do that.
Not anymore.
We don't have to do that?
That's in the council rules. We got rid of that.
Okay, never mind. Let's move to item 12, is it?
70.
11.
Mr. Mayor, we've had a request for a recess.
For what?
We will have a recess for make it 10 minutes.
Oh,
All right. It's enough time for everyone to leave.
Item 11D, consideration of a amendment to the intergovernmental agreement with Q-Life. Mr. Cleese.
Mr. Mayor, this is our last item before executive session this evening. I'm also pretty excited by this. As the city council hopefully knows, I've been the Q-Life administrator for a number of years. Inherited this duty from Wasco County when I was the administrative services director. And Q-Life is an intergovernmental agency between, prior Wasco County and the city of the Dalles. And Q-Life over the last couple of years has been undergoing a strategic planning process. Q-Life's been around for about 20 years and has really been presented with a kind of fork in the road in terms of the services that they offer and their mission and goals for our community. Q-Life provides open access fiber service to foster better connectivity throughout Wasco County and affordable access to broadband to the benefit of our businesses, our institutions, and our community. And Q-Life really needed to make a decision on whether they were in this business or if it was time to make a different change. And given the needs of this community, the opportunities presented at the federal and state level, the Q-Life board gave direction to staff that we were certainly in this business, that the mission of Q-Life had not been fulfilled, and that we needed to double down on what Q-Life offered and how it would go about achieving that mission. One of the ways that was identified to do this was to bring on an additional partner who has additional capacities and resources, and that partner was Northern Wasco County PUD, which was involved at the inception of Q-Life. So included in your packet is a revised, amended, and restated IGA for Q-Life, incorporating the PUD, in addition, of course, to Wasco County and the city of the Dalles. This has gone before the PUD Board of Directors and Wasco County Board of County Commissioners and have been approved. As you'll see in my staff report, rather than rewriting another memo, I simply copied Mr. Roger Klein's memo, which provides a detailed background and context on the item. And with this, the passage of this second amended and restated IGA, the PUD will be confirmed as a member of Q-Life. They were voted in previously by the Q-Life board, but basically with a timer on it if this restated IGA was not passed. One of the things that the PUD has already brought to the table is that they are fully funding, and we have brought on board a new Q-Life administrator who will take over my prior role. And one of the major changes in the restated IGA is that the structure of the Q-Life board itself will change. And so there'll be 7 members on the board. There'll be an elected in the city manager from the city. There'll be an elected in the county administrator from the county, and there'll be an elected in the general manager from the PUD, comprising the board with 1 additional person at large. So it'll be a 7-member board, and that structure will change. There's a variety of other changes here throughout the IGA. Again, trying to give Q-Life a good foundation to expand and fulfill its mission not only through the city of the Dalles, but Wasco County as well. Q-Life currently provides some compensation to the city for the time I previously spent with Q-Life. Over the next year or so, I would say there's going to be a lot of evolution and change with Q-Life. And so I imagine that compensation will change, especially as I join the board and relinquish the Q-Life administrator position to Dr. Liz Lance, who joined us about a month ago. And so we may have some budget implications on that front. And we have 2 council representatives on the Q-Life board, Councilor Randall and Councilor Runyon, who have been part of this conversation through the whole process, supported the decision at the Q-Life board level, and recent action to finalize a services agreement between the PUD and Q-Life to set the stage and foundation for those increased resources and to work out how Q-Life will move forward and grow its vision. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have on the IGA included in your packet or on the memo provided by Mr. Klein.
Any questions for Mr. Klebs? Questions? Or you?
I'll raise his hand.
Councilor Runyon.
I would just say that I want to commend our city manager for the job he's done with Q Life. I've served on that board 8 years with the county and now 6 years with the city, and I still don't understand half of what we do, but he does. And I'm always more worried about the money and the financial part than understanding all the jargon that goes on about the internet and so forth. But he has done a tremendous job for our community, and in conjunction with the county, a tremendous job as well. But it is time that we have our own executive director, and looks like we made a good choice.
If you think your lack of understanding is going to keep me from appointing you to the Q Life board next year, you're sadly mistaken. Okay, anybody else?
Just that I served the first 4 years of council on that board, and we spent the last 2 of my 4 trying to figure out what to do next. And so I'm glad that this is the direction they chose. I think it's going to really help the whole county.
Maybe you can bring in the new executive director to a council meeting and introduce her.
I had hoped that she could attend this evening, but she also teaches on the side, and this is one of her last courses last evening courses that she'll be teaching as she takes on her new gig. And I've been, as Councilor Runyon mentioned a moment ago, I've been working with Q Life for quite a while. I really enjoy it. It's really interesting, and it's a different blend of work. And so while I'm a little saddened to have some of my time maybe freed up, it's a big change for Q Life, and it's the result of a lot of hard work by the Q Life board, by many of the volunteers, by some of the Q Life staff and contractors. And I must give a shout out to the 4 attorneys that we had working on this IGA as well. So it was a robust discussion and process to go through.
Anything else? I'm looking for a motion.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to make a motion to authorize the city manager to execute the second amended and restated intergovernmental agreement for the Quality Life Intergovernmental Agency.
This is Runyon. I will second that.
It's been moved by Councilor Randall and seconded by Councilor Runyon to authorize the city manager to execute the intergovernmental agreement with Q Life. Any more discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Raise your hand. Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you very much. All right, with that,
We just stay. Yeah, it's up to you. You just stay here. It's up to you.
here we go. City Council of the City of the Dalles will now meet in executive session in accordance with ORS 192.6602H to consult with counsel concerning the legal rights and duties of a public body with regard to current litigation or litigation likely to be filed. Representatives of the news media and designated staff shall be allowed to attend the executive session. Although their members of the audience are asked to leave the room, representatives of the news media are specifically directed not to report on or otherwise disclose any of the deliberations or anything said about these subjects during the executive session, except to state the general subject of the session as previously announced. No final decision may be made in executive session. At the end of the executive session, we will return to open session and welcome the audience back into the room. We expect to return in about 10 minutes. And I would like to also point out, I've invited Councilor-elect Ben Ring to attend the executive session as well. So with that, we'll adjourn into the conference room.
Amy.